Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hi, and welcome to the Jeff Gerstmann Show. Sorry. That's the name of the program. I'm your host this week, Jeff Gerstmann, here to talk with you about the latest in video gaming and its surrounding culture stuff. Things that are near video game adjacent, energy drinks. The important stuff. Hi, everybody. It's May, and that means we are 1 week closer to the release of Street Fighter 6. That is kind of how I am marking time right now. Definitely okay, this game's coming real soon now. Got to just strap in and wait for it. A bunch of previews ran today. It looks like it'll be like kind of the last kind of hands-on before the game comes out, and I was invited to that event and could not attend, and so there's just like, oh man. Yeah, it's whatever. The game's out very soon, but I very much I could not make it work schedule wise, but it was like I did get invited to head up to San Francisco and see the game one last time before it comes out. But yeah, I am extremely excited for that one, obviously. And yeah, that is I am, if I had a calendar in here, there would almost be like a counting down the days sort of thing. But we're what, like it's May 2nd, so we're really just about a month away from that, and then I guess Diablo 4 is not too far past that, and yeah, we'll get in, and then all the Summer Game Fest stuff is about to kick off as well. I'm starting to get a lot of emails looking to book appointments for to see games in June. So I'm investigating how that's going to work. Well, whatever. I'm going to go see a bunch of games like I did last year. It was kind of like the first thing I did as a part of this new operation. So we've really been we're 11 months in now. I guess it was June 7th, I think, was the first episode of this podcast, and now here we are nearly a year later, and that's wild, but awesome, and thanks everyone for listening. It's been cool, but whatever, we'll talk about that next month. I'm not gonna have my 11-month anniversary. Yeah, so it's we're starting to get emails in about going off and seeing some games kind of in that June, in that kind of E3 Summer Game Fest lane, in that little time frame there, and that's pretty cool. I've gotten some appointment requests for games that I'm like, oh, absolutely, I need to see that, and then some that I'm like, I should probably take that, but I don't, and so I'm starting, I'm not sure how many. There's a delicate balance to booking appointments for stuff like this, where if you book things extremely early, then you're all booked up when the late appointments come in, and then they're like, oh, by the way, the stuff you super really want to see, we're gonna talk to you about a week ahead of time, and you're like, oh god, I'm all booked up, I need to move a bunch of stuff. So it's like this waiting game of like, well, there's some stuff I want to book late, and some stuff I know I want to book immediately, and I don't know. There's an art to it, I suppose, is the answer to that. But it's exciting. Like that's I've already gotten emails for companies and games and stuff that I'm like, oh, I absolutely, yes, I need to go see this. I need to go see whatever it is you're announcing. I need to go see whatever, in some cases it's like, hey, we're showing a thing, and we're not going to tell you what it is. Which can cut both ways, because some companies have 9 different games in development, and you go in thinking it's one game, and then you sit down and you're like, oh, okay, all right, this is still cool. No, don't get me wrong, I'm here to do the job, don't get me wrong, but I thought we were talking about something else. And so there's a delicate game you can play with the people booking appointments that is actually a little bit more difficult for me to play right now because it's just me. But you would be able to, like, let's say Microsoft is booking for 3 different appointments for unannounced games. which is, that we would get contacts like that for E3 all the time. Like, hey, we got 3 breakout sessions for 3 games. When do you want to come see them? And you're like, okay, well, I should go see them. It's Microsoft. They probably got something good. But then you have to be like, hey, so I want to make sure I send the right people to this. So if one of these happens to be a driving game, if you could just like wink and nod and look over here, like give me some kind of indication so I know who to send where, would kind of help you make sure that you're sending the right people to the right appointments and stuff, so that you're like, someone who completely hates driving games doesn't end up in a Forza appointment going like, so cars, huh? These wheels, they look like they could be more round, and so you want to make sure that you're lining that stuff up properly. Microsoft was just an example I'm pulling. I literally have not heard anything from them about anything about that stuff. So don't jump to any weird conclusions there. I don't know what they're planning around this stuff. If they're going to be in Southern California, or if they're just sitting in Seattle and pushing play on a tape for their thing, or I don't know what they're. Or they said, are they at the Microsoft Theater again? Anyway, I'm sure that some of that information is out there. I have no idea. I'm focusing on what I'm focusing on, and now I'm like kind of having to shift into that sort of mode to book all this other stuff. So I think I'm gonna be in the market for. Originally, I was like, the appointments like this stuff, I just go see the game and then I'll come talk about it later, and that'll work out. But now I'm thinking like maybe I will buy. And I have one around here somewhere, but it's older, and so I bet I could do better. But I'm thinking of buying an audio recording rig, like a good portable, some kind of Tascam, something with built-in mics. Like, I'm not looking to lug a ton of gear around, but if I can do that and just record it on something that's a little bit nicer than the phone microphone, I'm thinking that perhaps I'll record some interviews that way, and then perhaps come back with, interview audio to put into this podcast or put into a separate podcast or whatever it ends up being. Yeah, that old Zoom yeah, that's the one I have around here somewhere is that thing. But there are, I don't know if it matters or not, but it's like, what if I recorded these in 32-bit float so that, if the mics got blown out, I would have a little bit more dynamic range to play around with if things went wrong. Those old Zooms, basically some of these newer ones that I've been looking at will do things like, we've got 2 microphones on this, and one records at this full volume, and then the other one records at a lower volume as a safety in case the main microphone gets blown out. And you can kind of pick and choose from there, which I'm looking to just like fire and forget with this stuff, because I'm not going to have a separate audio person that can monitor levels along the way or whatever. I'm literally just going to be walking up and going like, so your video game, you punch people, what's that like? And and go back and forth like that. So I'm looking for something that will give me better options for cleanup afterwards in case I need it. If that makes sense. And so I may invest in a new portable recorder there. But that Zoom, I think I know where that thing is. So bare minimum, I've got that. And that thing's been useful, but yeah, I don't want to lug around a bunch of XLR cables and separate microphones and, hey, here, hold this. And, I'm not looking to do that this time. So we'll kind of see how all that goes. Oh man, what else is happening? It's been a real roller coaster these last 7 days. The announcement that Vice is shutting down Waypoint a month from today, June 2nd, I think, is going to be their last day. It's I just did a podcast yesterday with John Warren, Sunday Scrolls, which, as the name may indicate, will come out on Sunday. And we talked about this stuff. John, of course, is formerly of Fanbyte, so he has also been through the ringer a bit lately. And The not to just spoil that entire discussion, but I think my main takeaway from this is it absolutely sucks. It's awful. It is the sort of situation that you just look at it like for the people involved, the human side of it. I've known Patrick a long time, but like that whole team over there has been doing awesome work for years, and it sucks to think that they won't be together doing that. The other side of that is like nothing about this is surprising, which is like it's disgusting in a way that's the point we're at. But like I look at it and go like, yeah, no, it's. What, a big media company doesn't understand how to properly like care about its video game arm and just casts it off like it was nothing? Man, who's ever seen that before, right? It's not, it's not surprising. It's not especially shocking. You just look at it and go like, man, this sucks. And then of course the news came out, or we started seeing some reporting implying that Vice is going to be filing for bankruptcy. So they've obviously. The media business across the board is bad. Like was it like BuzzFeed News shut down not that long ago? It's a really the landscape out there is real rough right now, and sometimes it seems like it doesn't have to be a real kind of like, hey, we're in some companies are out there making record profits and still laying people off, right? And there's a whole, I don't know. I think that the all the layoffs and everything else that's happening across, whether it's Amazon, Facebook, Disney, whatever, they're kind of all giving a little bit of a cover to smaller companies that are like, oh, we can lay people off right now because that's the thing. Like everyone's doing it right now. We will not get the scrutiny that maybe we would before. Of course, some other layoffs earlier in the year too. It's sad. I think it speaks poorly of the people in power at a lot of publishers, a lot of media companies, that it often seems like the video game thing is the thing that gets cast off first. It's the thing that they don't understand. It's the thing that they don't, there's just aspects of it that they're just like, oh, those are like toys. Like they would never think about doing that to, and as I'm saying this, like they would, but it's one of the first ones on the chopping block, not movies, not TV coverage. Because they understand that they're like, oh yeah, no, people watch TV, video games. I don't know who plays, for an industry that, likes to talk about how it's bigger than movies and how much more money it's rolling around in and everything else. I think the idea that covering video games in a critical fashion or in any fashion, like that is such a dicey proposition for media companies, I think is sad. I think it speaks poorly of the entire industry, the entire video game industry, that there's no publication of record really for, I guess IGN is as close as it gets now, right? For as far as like, here's a big outlet that covers video games, like as far as like a publication of record. That's something I felt that like back in my GameSpot days, I felt like we were that publication of record for the video game industry. We were the biggest. We were taking it very seriously. Some may disagree, but that is the feeling that we kind of had. But it's so yeah. I don't know. I think it speaks ill of this industry that it can't necessarily support a publication like that. And obviously, a lot of things changed. And in the advertising side of things, it used to be that video game publications would get a lot of advertising from video games, which is fine. That's not necessarily a, sometimes it looks a little weird to have review on the same page as an ad, but like it makes sense that like a video game company would want to advertise to people reading about video games, right? And at some point when social media kind of rolled in and fucked everything up, like now all that ad money just it went to Facebook and went to Twitter and went to, other companies like that, because they were like, oh, hey, I can reach the gaming audience a lot cheaper by buying ads on Facebook instead of buying them on GameSpot or buying them on IGN or whatever else. And so, that happened years ago. And since then, it's just been a weird, social media, I think, changed everyone's consumption patterns around visiting websites in the first place. And so the idea that there are any video game websites left at all, I look at as like any of these could go. And I think that we will see more. If not full publication shutdowns, I think that we will see more people losing their jobs in the months to come. And I think it's sad that the video game industry is as big as it is, but somehow no one can seem to figure out how to keep this from happening. It's also, I think a lot of it is sort of cyclical. And media and publishing is such a strange business anyway, and it always ends up going through this. Like I feel like I have, like I'm out on my own doing this with you, and it's been fun, and it takes me out of that specific end of the rat race or whatever to some degree, and that's great. But I think that, like I said, I think it's a cycle. I don't think we've hit bottom yet. I think that we'll see some stuff get worse before it gets better. But my hope is that on the other side of that, that we can find new ways to publish. We can find new ways to kind of rebuild the media business, because it's necessary. I think that we're running into a situation where I think there are an increasing number of people that don't understand that. That just think that they can get all their information from like word of mouth and the company line, the whole thing of like, hey, this company put out an interview with itself about how great its game is. And you're like, awesome. Here's Luke Skywalker talking to the star of Star Wars Jedi about stuff. And you're like, okay, that's fun. But you need people out there that are kind of holding, that are kind of holding the line, as it were, and trying to provide a useful service to readers, and listeners and viewers, whatever you want to call them, the audience these days. I think there will always be a place for that. It's just a matter of like how big or small it is and what else is going on. So, right now, obviously there's this kind of problem happening in the kind of major, the publication. It's why, like it's why I'm working alone, right? It's like, hey, there's a lot more risk when you've got more people involved, and there's a lot more of this and that. And, it's why you see these publications kind of having a like going through this, is because payroll is expensive, hosting is expensive, like all of this other stuff. And anyway, I not to go on for another hour about it, but I think it really sucks that Waypoint is shutting down. Waypoint has done some fantastic work, and Patrick Klepek specifically, there's a whole team there. Like I worked with Patrick for a while, and he's one of the sharpest people I've ever worked with. And so you have to imagine like, oh, he'll figure something out. But it also, the sad part is, I think that you run into these situations and you find a number of voices, a number of writers, and this has been the trend since the 90s in some ways, but that people get out of this line of work and go into, whether it's game development, or they become community managers, or they find some role on the other side, and you never really hear from them again. And it's sad because there's this kind of brain drain or something of the kind of some of the more tenured voices in the space just kind of eventually get to a point where it's like, okay, well, I've got a family to feed and I can't keep fucking around like this, and all these places underpay and all that, and so they go behind the scenes, and we on the other side, I think, are way worse off for that. And so, we'll see what happens to folks. I don't know. It's yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of very messy thoughts about it. Obviously, this has been, this is stuff I think about at least once a week, right? Whether there are people losing jobs or not, they're like the future of video game coverage is something I am borderline obsessed with, for better or for worse. And, yeah, it's a mess out there. So I want to thank everyone that's been, supporting this program, making this program possible, and of course making all the other programs that we're doing possible as well. If you do want to hear more about it, you can go over to patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. You get access to an ad-free version of this show. There's some additional shows. This week we'll have the next episode of Game Boys to Men, which is part 2 of Glenn and I discussing our time at Blaster Magazine back in 1994. And I think that's our longest episode yet. It really goes some places. There's a potentially stolen jacket involved. That is apparently it is still driving a wedge between Glenn and I, as far as I can tell. And a number of other topics there. That was my first job out of high school, was working for that magazine, and I got laid off 11 months in because there was no money left. Stop me if you heard that one before, I guess. But yeah, it's that's just kind of how it goes. And it shouldn't have to be that way. But yeah, that's coming along. The next episode of the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame has been recorded, and I've got to edit that together, and that'll hopefully go out this week as well. And then of course we've got some games to play later in the week too. So that's patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. Thanks everyone for being here with me through a really, like I said, a really wild time in this space for sure. What else is going on? Y'all heard about Blue Sky? Is that, I'm trying to figure out how pervasive the discussion of Blue Sky has become this past week or so. In case you're not familiar, it's the social media network that it's a lot like Mastodon. It's a lot like Mastodon in terms of they're trying to make a decentralized network that no one person can own and destroy. And it is basically Jack Dorsey is investing in it, who he's formerly one of the Twitter guys, but the idea is not that he's gonna run it and own it. It's a sort of a thing that they can kind of create as a protocol, and then anyone can kind of build their own nodes on that network. And and people say, and I think they're right to say it, but someone in the chat here says, I don't know why I'd trust Jack Dorsey a second time. And I guess my response to that is, yes, you're right, but also if there's one person who knows what doesn't work when building a social media company, it's probably Jack Dorsey. And there are some things that you get locked into that you cannot change because you're locked into it. And if you could start over from scratch, you would do things entirely differently. And so this thing is built to... I feel the same way about a video game wiki. I'll put it that way. How about that? There's some things about it that you just can't fix. And boy, if you could start over, you sure would do a lot of things differently. But there, it is similar to Mastodon in the idea that it is meant to be something that can be decentralized, and multiple people can run their own nodes that interact with each other, and all of that. It just, the difference solely lies in the sort of people that are using Blue Sky right now compared to the typical people that are on Mastodon these days. I see someone bring up Wario64. Wario64 has a Blue Sky account. I don't think they are updating it at this point, but it's invite only, so it's a weird clicky kind of thing. But it seems to be expanding quickly. But the people that are on it are like, they went and found all of the shit posters and the like Twitter addicts from 5 years ago or whatever, and there's a gigantic like trans community there that is super cool, and like it's people shit posting to the fullest, like their lives depended on it, and it's got a very fun vibe as a result. And it's been kind of awesome on that front. Mastodon, like, has very similar ideas to solve the problem, where like no one person owns the network, so no one person can destroy it. It's really kind of more of a protocol and a network and decentralized service and so on and so forth. But Mastodon, for whatever reason, people got it in their head that Mastodon was complicated and difficult to understand, which is, it's not. It's really not. And Blue Sky is going to be complicated in the exact same ways fairly soon. So, but Mastodon attracted, sysadmins and people with a more techish mindset. I'll put it to you this way. I put a post on both services. I posted on Mastodon and I posted on Blue Sky saying, hey, I'm looking for a new hosting provider because my hosting provider is merging into GoDaddy, and I don't think I want that. And I got 2 responses on Blue Sky, but I got like 40 on Mastodon. Like people with like very specific, like, well, I mean, if you just need something dumb and simple, there's this, and this. But really, I mean, you should just go to AWS. You should just, like all of that. So, that to me pretty much illustrated the differences between the 2 services right away. But it's fascinating. I don't know. Blue Sky feels like in some ways that if any one of these not Twitter services is going to have a shot, this is kind of the one. Just because right now people are using it to have fun instead of, and a lot of other services fall into this trap where a lot of it is just them talking about Twitter. Or them talking about, like, it's people talking about the service and not talking about the shit you talk about on these services. It's not enough pictures of food. It's not enough people just having fun doing whatever. Instead, it's people going like, well, I think here's my hot take on social media, and here's this and whatever else, right? So Blue Sky, I think by their invite only thing, attracting like a lot of fucking shit posting dirtbags very early on, they have pulled ahead in the race for just sheer bullshit and actual fun. Not to say that there aren't people talking nonstop shit about Twitter on Blue Sky. There certainly is that, but it just feels like it has a larger percentage of people simply enjoying themselves and posting about their days and that sort of thing. It's been interesting, and it's, I don't have any invites, and they say they give everybody invites every 2 weeks, and I've only been on there for like 3 days, so I don't really know how that will develop. It's the sort of thing that when they open the doors, the fun will kind of stop because it'll become the same fucking bullshit fight that every other network becomes. But for now, at least, it's a good time, and we'll kind of see how it all goes, I guess. Right. But I guess like that's my, like the Blue Sky people seem like they have some good ideas. I'll say that, and they are working very hard to execute on that stuff. And it's not Jack Dorsey out there going like, "Here's my vision." It's like it's the coders doing the work that are posting and all of this other stuff. And I think that's been refreshing and entertaining. So give that a look, I guess, when, if an invite comes your way or if they do finally open it up. I don't really know what their plans are for stuff. That's been fun. Of course, for longer posts, Tumblr is still a thing. And of course, I like co-host quite a bit. Cohost.org has been wonderful. And all of that. But now it just feels like there are so many different places for all that stuff that everything is so spread out. It's strange. It's weird now. It used to not feel this way, but here we are. Why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back. We're going to talk about Redfall. We're going to talk about Redfall. And we'll talk about Star Wars Jedi Survivor. We're going to talk about Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And Combat Master. Some good games too. We'll be right back after this. One of the best things you can do to get a better night of sleep is keeping cool at night. That's right. Cool sleep is better sleep. And now there's Miracle Made sheets that help you tap into the power of self-cooling temperature regulation, which again, that's been shown to improve deep sleep quality by over 20%. Would you like to have over 20% better sleep? That's, maybe a weird number to actualize in your head, but honestly, every little bit helps, when it comes to getting a good night's sleep. And staying cool is one of the coolest ways to get that better night of sleep. All right, now what are Miracle Made sheets? What's this all about? What's going on? What are we talking about here? We're talking about silver-infused fabrics that were originally inspired by NASA. These Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating, so they're designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, and hence, you get better sleep every night. That silver also helps in the clean department. Being infused with silver helps prevent 99.7% of bacterial growth, which helps the sheets stay cleaner longer. In fact, 3 times longer than other sheets. No more stank odors on your sheets. You can wash them when you get to it instead of having to just like rip these things off like after one sweaty night. It's like, oh gosh, that's good for the environment. Washing your sheets less frequently. Miracle sheets are also luxuriously comfortable, which hey, at the end of the day, if they're like, hey, it's cool sleep and others, and then it was like rubbing Brillo pad on your face at night, that would not work. That just simply would not work. Miracle Made sheets are luxuriously comfortable. It doesn't have the high price tag of the other luxury brands out there, and they feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. So all that adds up. It's better for your skin. Stop sleeping on bacteria. The cleaner sheets means less gunk clogging up your pores, fewer breakouts and other skin problems. The benefits just go on and on. How do you get in on this? That's a great question. Here's how. Go to trymiracle.com/Jeff to try Miracle Made sheets today. With Mother's and Father's Day right around the corner, this is the perfect way to give someone you love the gift of better and more luxurious sleep. Save over 40% and be sure to use the promo code Jeff at checkout to save even more and get 3 free towels. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Jeff and use the code Jeff to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Jeff to treat yourself. And thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring the episode. Hi, we're back. And we're here to talk about video games. Redfall is kind of the biggest thing going right now, I suppose. This is Arcane's new vampire shooter. I have not finished the game. I am not going to finish the game. I'll tell you that up front. It seems bad. It seems very bad. It seems bad? It seems like a bad game. I put a few hours into it, and then I was surprised to see the reviews kind of land where they did, because I was like, well, this will probably pick up, and I was like, oh wait, no, this is a mid-6 ass game all day long. What is it? So Arcane obviously has become known for a specific type of first-person game, the kind of immersive sim sort of deal. This is not that. This is not one of those. This feels like they it's like an empty Borderlands. It's like it's sort of a loot shooter. You are, guns are dropping, you are equipping new guns and so on. You are picking from 4 different characters, each of which has their own skill tree and classes and abilities and stuff like that, much like Borderlands. And you are kind of going back to safe houses and taking on missions and then going out into the world and doing them and fast traveling back and forth. And but there's just nothing to it. Borderlands feels stuffed full in a lot of ways. Obviously there's empty areas from between place to place and you're meant to drive or whatever. But I feel like in Redfall, I'm just like walking from place to place, and it's like it's kind of an empty town, and there are some dudes on the streets with guns, and some of them follow the Hollow Man, and some of them are some military PMC guys. They both go down very quickly, and then there are vampires. And fighting vampires, you shoot them until their health gets down to a certain level, and that stuns them. And when they're stunned, you need to equip a weapon that has a stake attached to it. Not every weapon does, and so it's on you to one of your 3 equipped weapons had better have a stake on it, or else you just can't fucking kill vampires. And then you walk up and click in the right stick, and it stabs them, and they blow up. And then you get 45 experience points, and you go, all right, I'll keep going, I guess. Some vampires are presented in a more boss or end of mission like fashion. And some of those have additional abilities on them. Like, and these seem randomized. Like there was a mission, one of the early missions, or one of the early side missions is like, go kill the vampire that's kind of running this area so that we can take it back. And the first time I went there, you go into this house and you go downstairs and you have to like look at a wall before the vampire will spawn. It's a really awkward interaction. Where like you're in this downstairs area and you're like, okay, well, I guess if I follow this trail of blood and then there's blood on the wall, and if I walk into this room and look at this puddle of blood on the wall, then I start hearing a vampire behind me. But if I don't do that, I could stand in that basement forever because the vampire's not there. It hasn't spawned yet. It's a weird choice. The first time I actually died to the vampire, it had those enemies in Destiny that have the shields around them, but they're the shields with the holes between them. The shield rotates around and you have to get your shots in between the shield. It was a vampire that had that for whatever reason. That's something vampires can do in the world of Redfall. I died to that because it was a really tight area, and so you couldn't really get around the vampire to get your shots in. It was like a really ill-conceived combat scenario. And I was like, well, I'm not looking forward to going back and doing that, but it's like the thing I have to do, so let's go do it. I go over there again, and then I stand there for 5 minutes going, where's this vampire? I'm like, oh, I need to go look at the wall. So I go look at the wall and then turn around, and it's a vampire that has a totally different ability. So it's like, it seems like it'll re-roll those special abilities every time they spawn, which it was much easier the second time to just, like every other vampire you see in the open world, shoot it a bunch and then stab it with a wooden stake. The shooting, there's not a lot of recoil on the guns. And so lining up headshots and just like emptying 30 bullets into a vampire's face is really easy. I was getting headshots with pistols from like insane distances and stuff. It's like the shooting is not super engaging. And the structure of the game is very like on paper you just go like, oh well, yeah, you accept the mission and then you go to that spot on the map and then do that. I was finding that like sometimes the spots on the map weren't showing up properly for some of the side stuff, and so I was like, well, I know it's somewhere in this area. I guess I need to wander around until something shows up, and that's what I had to do. Just kind of like aimlessly wander around an area, and then it was like, oh, 200 meters, this is over here, and then it started showing up on the mini map, which is just a weirdly annoying way to handle it. I picked a character. She's got her first two abilities are she has an energy umbrella that's like a shield, and you can upgrade that so that when the shield gets shot and you let it off, then it does more damage back towards the enemies that were shooting you. Or also I upgraded it so that as it gets shot, I get bullets. The other one I got was a trampoline, but instead it looks like a big old-timey elevator. It's like this old-timey ghost elevator appears, and then when you jump into when you intersect with the old-timey elevator, it launches you into the air like a trampoline. Could have just been a trampoline. I guess that's not as fancy or whatever, but it's and those operate on cooldowns. It does have co-op. I have not tried the co-op, but at the same time, talking to folks that have, like, the co-op end of this game feels like it, sounds like it was designed a generation ago. It'd have to be 2 generations ago, right? I mean, it's it doesn't seem to have drop in, drop out. From the sounds of things, only the host gets progress. It's just like stuff that you go like, man, we're past this now. Like that is probably my take on this entire game. In playing it, is it just feels like, man, we're past this. Like the problems this game has are problems that other games have solved. It feels like, it feels like a game that came out right before Borderlands 1, or the thing as I was thinking about it last night, I was like, it's like, remember when Borderlands was first announced and it didn't have that wild cel-shaded look, and they weren't talking about it having a sense of humor, and it was just like military dudes doing military dude stuff in a super generic way. This reminds me of that. And I think the writing is really rotten. The character dialogue specifically, the story itself is just kind of whatever. The town is overrun by vampires, we've got to take it back. Okay. But it's just got a lot of like, oh, I guess I can do that now. Oh, that's a thing. That's like the kind of popping off at these vampires in a way that is just like, it makes me want to lay down and go to sleep. As they are quipping, I'm just like, cool, man. I so don't want to do this. I so don't want to hear this style of writing anymore, especially not in a game this mediocre. If the rest of the game was fucking hot banger after hot banger, and then the dialogue was kind of just like dumb quips, you'd be like, well, all right. I mean, shit, I played through Borderlands 3 with the sound down, and that game's writing is miserable. Oh my God. So, that's a surmountable issue. But when it's married to all of this other stuff, like as I'm playing it, I'm like, there's just kind of nothing here to latch onto. There's no thing there's nothing in that game. There's nothing in Redfall that I feel like I can latch onto and go, well, at least it's got this. You just kind of play it and just go like, yeah, I don't know. There's really, this game kind of just has nothing going for it. A lot of people, I've seen a lot of complaints about the performance on PC. I've been playing on PC and have not had massive problems. I will say there have been a couple of situations where the frame rate is hitched up a bit. In a way that you go like, well, that's weird. There doesn't really seem like that should have happened, but here we are. But I have not had any major issues with it. For whatever that's worth. But it's the sort of thing you just go like, well, it's on Game Pass. So if you like to play games with friends and you have zero interest in making sure that those games are quality, you just need to chew through something new, well, at least it's something new. but it's also nothing new. There's nothing about it that truly feels unique or worthy. It's weird, like that's it's in this middle ground where no one part of it is so miserably bad where you can at least go like, yeah, but oh my god, this, like there's like, it is that perfect middle ground of, it is the most disappointing game possible because it's just like, here you go, and it exists, and you just go like, ugh. And I don't know that I have anything nice to say about it other than like, yeah, sure, it doesn't, like, it's not. There are games out there that are way worse, but it's not exciting. It's not broken in exciting ways either. It's just kind of like really bland fights against AI, and like it tries to have these kind of stealthish mechanics where you can sort of sneak up behind somebody and shoot them, but also the hearing range of enemies is so low that you'll get into like a firefight with like 3 dudes and then walk around a corner and there's a guy who never activated, and it's I find it to be intensely dull, like really boring. Like this is a game that I don't think there's any, like, people complain about performance, like, yeah, I'm sure they'll patch in some performance stuff or whatever else, but like, I don't think improving the co-op, if they got to a point where it's like, oh, you can drop in, drop out now, or oh, we redid some progress stuff, or we redid the, like, I just don't think the simple act of making your way through this game, the shooting, the writing, the dialogue, the quests that you're going on, the environments, like there's just nothing there either. And so it's the sort of thing that on the other end of some patches or whatever they do to it, like it's not going to suddenly be like, oh, this is amazing now. It'll be like, okay, yeah, well, it works as it should, and there you go. I've seen some people also say like, oh, people are just disappointed because it's not the game that Arcane is known for making. And to that, I will say, I am not especially interested in the type of game that Arcane is known for. I have never been a big Dishonored fan. And, Prey I recognized as a great game that I never really felt any real passion for. It's like, yeah, this is really cool. I never got really attached to it, but this is really neat. And definitely. So I wasn't going into this expecting it to be like, oh yeah, the next Arcane game. Like I went into it going like, okay, I think this is like a co-op shooter. And it appears to have loot from the last trailers, the last batch of stuff they did on it was like, oh, this is a loot shooter. I get it. Okay. I like those, turns out. So let's go or whatever. Someone in the chat said that they've heard it referred to as aggressively mid, and yeah, like, again, like these kind of tossed off terms feel a lot harsher than maybe you would intend, but like, it's the sort of thing that you just, I like co-op loot shooters. This is not a good one of those. You could do better on that front as well. So even I think the people who are like trying to write this off as just, people having bad expectations or whatever, like I like the style of game that this is attempting to be. I just think it is failing to impress on any one of those bullet points. Yeah, it's a highly mediocre game, and there's just not a lot of room for those kinds of games right now, and it's the sort of thing that, like, it's on Game Pass. So if you are looking to play games and you have Game Pass, it is a game. But it got me thinking about, like, how long can Game Pass get away with that? How long can Game Pass be the land of, middling video games and like decent third-party stuff, but like, the Crackdown 3s of the world? How much longer can they get a pass on Game Pass when it comes to that stuff? And also, it's this is a Microsoft-owned studio, right? Obviously, Redfall has been in development since, for longer than Microsoft owned these companies, right? And so, you can't necessarily lay all of it at the feet of Microsoft. I know people are trying to be like, oh, another Microsoft banger, blah, those guys, but they're starting to have a point on that front where you just go like, I feel like the games that are, again, even though this started development I believe it started development under an independent Bethesda. You do have to kind of look at it as like, well, now it's part of the Microsoft portfolio, and you just look at it as like, I don't understand how I don't understand what is going to happen with Microsoft these days. We'll get into it in the news with the Activision deal being blocked in the UK and some of the stuff they've said to their people around all of that. But like, it's Microsoft has I've talked a lot about how the Xbox brand felt like it was just kind of like one smash hit away from kind of like getting people back on board and kind of turning it around. Like, people like the general message out of Microsoft, right? The way they're running their business, the way they're like being open and be like, yeah, we'll put our games on Steam, we'll put our games out on PC. You can play them wherever you want. We want to meet you where you are. If you don't need an Xbox, don't get one. Hey, those are like good, cool messages. Those are very forward-thinking messages, and focusing on the cloud stuff. Even if you're not into that, at least it's like, they're doing things. They're trying to grow the gaming audience in ways that you look at and go like, yeah, man, like I can totally get behind that. But you have to have the games. And, it's always been this situation where you go like, well, the games will come. They're getting it together. They're figuring it out. And, Halo will be the game. Halo has had some issues, obviously. And I just kind of look at where they're at. And obviously they have some games announced that we haven't seen. Whether that's Perfect Dark or Fable. We've seen some Forza, obviously, and that's probably their next big thing internally. Internally is a weird distinction, though, because obviously Starfield, you don't think of it as a Microsoft, but it is, at this point, it is. And Starfield feels like their last big chance for the year to have something meaningful. And that game is... Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush, we have to include that there because that's a cool surprise game. It's fun. Is it tearing up the world? Is it the massive, no, but it's a cool, smaller game. That's a game you look at and go like, man, that's what a great thing for Game Pass. So they've had that positivity there as well. But like the engine they've been building over the last several years, once it was clear that the Xbox One was a train wreck, once it was clear that it was like, okay, this whole division is in need of reform or whatever, it feels like they've been on some kind of comeback trail. They've been trying to get back to where they were with the Xbox 360 slowly but surely. And you see them building little bits and pieces of the story, and you see them getting it together in ways you're like, okay, I see it happening. Except for the games, which... unfortunately, that's still the most important piece of the puzzle, is you have to have the games. And they just don't. And it's mind-blowing to watch it happen over and over again. You know what I mean? And for a while, I think I thought about that as like, man, those guys can't catch a break. They're all the things are getting together in the right way, and they're rebuilding. They're fixing a lot of the dumb problems they've had over these last several years and kind of getting it back together. And then like, here's a big game release and it comes out and you're like, not necessarily that Redfall is like some, a massive, whatever. It is a massive release for them because they don't have a ton of them this year, right? So everything matters for them. It's easy to look at it, at Redfall and just go like, I don't know. It's some shooter. It's like some weird thing from Arcane. And you're like, I don't know. Like, but they're still charging full price for it. It's still, thought of in that context. And so it does two things. One, I think it puts even more pressure on Starfield, pressure that I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. Can Starfield live up to the expectations that it is that are building for it? I don't know. I don't know anymore. That game's going to have to be a lot of things to a lot of people in order to kind of change the conversation around the Xbox brand, I suppose. But like, yes, there's a ton of great third-party stuff. I'm not saying that, certainly not saying that like, oh, Game Pass is a miserable failure or whatever. Like, there are a ton of great games on there, but none of them are Microsoft's, and that's not a great place to be in. And so, yeah, I don't know. Redfall kind of was this reminder that like Microsoft still feels like they have a long way to go to get it together. And be able to kind of finally put the sins of the Xbox One generation behind them, right? I mean, they're still, and obviously the pandemic is still looming large in some of this as well, I'm sure, but they're getting hit very hard by it at a time when they can't really afford to get hit hard by it, I guess, is the thing. This is starting to feel like it is getting out of control again or something. It's just like, what is going on with Xbox? I don't know anymore. It's weird. And so, now all eyes look to June, right? They're going to have announcements in June, and that'll be the next time that we'll see Forza, I'm sure, because obviously that's probably getting pretty close to release. Or did they give that a date? Anyway, obviously Forza is not that far off. And there are those announced games that they could finally have in a state where they show, is this the time for them to talk about A Perfect Dark? Is this the time for them to talk about whatever is happening with Fable? Is Fable in a place where it is now stable enough that have they decided what Fable is yet? And can they generate a trailer that represents that vision? Yeah, Hellblade. Yeah, Avowed. Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's just, there's no scenario in which Hellblade 2 is like a massive, I don't know, like as the follow-up to Hellblade. Like, Hellblade was a cool graphical showpiece, and Hellblade 2 looks like it's neat as well. I don't think it's on the same level as some of these other franchises. Maybe that's me, but it just like, yeah, that'll come out and that'll be a good kind of like secondary kind of cool thing, whether it's great or not. But it's something, yeah. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's just a bizarre, it's a bizarre situation. It's then exacerbated by what these various governments around the world think about their acquisition plans, but we'll get into that in the news. Star Wars Jedi Survivor came out last week. There's obviously been a ton of discussion around the quality of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. This one's a bummer. This one's a huge bummer. I really like this game. I really like the characters and the environments and the gameplay for the most part. I think some of the combat feels a little mashy and, in ways that I sort of wish it was a little bit more precise. But it's a mess. And I feel like I got the shortest possible end of the stick on the PC version of the game because a lot of people are talking about, like, oh, the performance isn't what it needs to be, and it runs so poorly, and there's stuttery there, and there's all these problems. I've had all that stuff, but also the game just crashes on me all the time. So I've had to replay significant portions of that game, sometimes 4 different times, in my attempt to get to a checkpoint so that I can save my progress and never have to do that thing again. And it's been rough. And yeah, so I do have the PlayStation 5 version, and I did start a game there and played about an hour of it. And then I was like, well, they're saying that these patches are right around the corner on PC, and I'm so much further in there. Like, I would much rather wait and play it there. But now I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what to do. They issued another patch this morning or yesterday. There's another patch that has hit post-launch. But they're saying it only works. It's CPU improvements, but only when ray tracing is turned off. Okay. Well, and yes, I've seen some people say on the other end of that patch now they are experiencing crashing when they were not experiencing crashing before. So that's a fucking mess. Remember when they delayed this game 6 weeks specifically to avoid the problems they had with the first game? Remember when there were news stories saying the game's been pushed back 6 weeks so that they can make sure that they get the that they land this plane smoothly. They did not. They did not land this plane smoothly. I know that there's still patches coming to the console versions of the game because, people are not satisfied with the way that version runs either. But it is endlessly frustrating because, again, this is a game that should be a no-brainer, feel-good smash hit, and you just go, hell yeah, man, what a great game. One of the best Star Wars games. I don't even like Star Wars, but boy, I love this thing. That's basically where I'm at with it. But it just doesn't run. Last time I played it, so it was a weird situation where I was stuck in one area and couldn't get out. And it crashed for me there 6 different times in 6 different places in this one environment. And it's a story zone, so it's not even like a big combat area. I'm like trying to walk through this area and get to this story thing so that I could walk back to my ship, get the blaster, unlock that, and then get on the ship and go do the next mission. And I couldn't get out. It would crash at this spot. I'd watch a whole long cutscene and then it would crash. I'd load back in and then have to skip through the cutscene again, and then it would crash in a different spot. And then so this was launch day. And then there were no patches. Later that night I was like, I'll try it again, I guess. And then I tried it again, and then managed to get on my ship and play an hour and a half of it without it crashing. And I was like, oh, awesome. Great. And made it through a whole area, completed an objective, unlocked the last lightsaber stance that I'm not going to use. And then went to the next area to start to do things. And there's a cutscene. This is the second time that this has happened in the story where you are like kind of flying through the air. You're falling. You're standing on something that crumbled, whatever it is. And a jetpack stormtrooper rushes you and grabs you out of the sky. Both times that's happened to me in the game. It happens pretty early on, and then it happened again. Both times, as soon as the stormtrooper wraps his arms around Cal, the game crashes. Just like, boop, boop. I'm like, oh, fuck. And it happened again this second time in the story that happened too. And that's where I left it off. Now that they patched it again, I'll probably try it again and see if anything has changed for me. Because it's been a few days since I've tried it, but incredibly frustrating. It's funny because they showed us the game running on PC. What was that? 3 weeks before release or something, 3 or 4, and it ran great. It was running awesome. I don't know, and so you just kind of look at it as like, hey, there are so many different configurations for PC out there that maybe they didn't account for some. And they issued this kind of like, I don't know, apology, to basically say, hey, we're aware that parts of it are broken. We are aware that Star Wars Jedi Survivor isn't performing to our standards for a percentage of PC players, in particular those with high-end machines or certain specific configurations. Yeah. Uh-huh. It's certainly got problems. Let me call up the rest of this. A note from the Jedi team. For example, players using cutting-edge multi-threaded chipsets designed for Windows 11 were encountering problems on Windows 10. Or high-end GPUs coupled with lower-performing CPUs also saw unexpected frame loss. Rest assured, we're working to address those cases quickly. These cases quickly. I am running Windows 11. I like Windows 11. I generally think if you can run Windows 11, you probably should. It's fine. And I have a 4090 and I have a 5950X in the old CPU slot. And it runs terribly. The taskbar is you can set the taskbar to not be in the center. That is an option that Windows 11 affords you. It is still Windows. You can still configure the hell out of it. It's not a whatever. I'm not here to evangelize for Windows 11, but it's been fine for me. So yeah, I don't know. These specific the specific cases they're citing where it's like, if you have a high-end GPU but a lower-end CPU, then you're going to lose frames, or this is going to be, and that doesn't there's nothing in there that says the game also, some people, it's been crashing for them nonstop. Like, nothing in there about that. So I don't know. While there is no single comprehensive solution for PC performance, the team has been working on fixes we believe will improve performance across a spectrum of configurations. We are committed to fixing these issues as soon as possible, but each patch requires significant testing to ensure we don't introduce new problems. And it sounds like this patch that just went out is introducing new problems for some people, so they're right to be worried. As you might expect, the Steam reviews are taking a bit of a bath on this. They're all the way down to mixed. And it's a sad situation. Because when it runs well, it runs great. But that doesn't happen very often. It will drop frames at the drop of a hat. And again, for me, it's the crashing problems. There's another issue that I saw popping up that I did not run into, where an error screen popped up for people that said, it was this really ambiguous thing that was like, hey, something broke and you're probably not going to be able to proceed. You should reset to this last save and try it again. You can continue if you want, but it's probably going to be broken. And like, what scenario showed up in late testing or whenever that then required someone to put that error screen, that option screen in the game? Like, someone had to program, like, all right, if this thing breaks in this specific way, we got to pop this thing up and have it say, like, hey, man, something fucking fucked up, buddy. You missed some story stuff and something's going to burn down. You probably don't want to play. You probably should stop playing. Look, hey, games come in hot. Games launch with bugs. It's 2023. There's a certain number of issues that you just kind of, for better or worse, I'm going to say for worse, we have come to expect when it comes to games launching, right? Nothing launches completely clean anymore. It kind of comes with the territory. If you're buying a game week of release, then you're the last line of defense on, some of these bugs for the folks that will wait until later. I guess I just like, that's something that, why? I mean, obviously the issue is not as simple as like, hey, instead of programming that screen in, you should have just fixed the problems, because who knows? Maybe they don't know how to fix the problems. Maybe they're like, hey, we got to ship this game and we don't know, we have not been able to solve these issues. And the best we can do is put in a screen that lets us know that we've detected that there's a problem and try to get people back on track. That's a bad scenario to be in. That just seems like a really terrible spot to be in with your game, where you're like, okay, we've got to put We've got to put these screens in and let people know that like something broke. Maybe they should have just had the game lock up, like forced a hard lock. Like that was the was that SSX, the last SSX that was programmed to do that? Is that what it was? Remember the old NBA Elite T-pose problem that killed NBA Elite and all of that? That was an engine problem that they couldn't quite fix, and so they instead created a situation where if they detected a character going into that T-pose state, they crashed the game. They force crashed it. They're like, nope, broken, before you could see the T-pose and clown on it. Maybe they should have done that here instead of popping up a thing going like, we've detected a serious issue and we're going to let you can keep playing. But you shouldn't. Yes, it's a fair point that yes, the being here in a place where we're saying maybe it'd be better if it crashed, that is indeed a hell of a place to be. I wish them the best in terms of fixing this, because it's like I said, it seems like a really cool game. It seems Jedi Survivor is a lot of fun when it's all working. I think the characters are exciting. I think the world, the scenario that you are in, the story that you are trying to progress through is compelling. And I want to play it a lot. I really want to play it. And I'm not going to until they fix it. And maybe they won't fix it until Street Fighter is out, and then I will instead play Street Fighter and probably never play Jedi Survivor. Like, if we're being realistic about it, we're right around the corner from more games coming out. And so this is the lane that I would play Jedi Survivor in. And we'll see how it goes. Right? It's a disappointing, and you know, like it's funny because remember with Redfall when the big controversy was like, oh man, I can't believe it's not launching with performance mode on Xbox, and they're going to have to add that in after launch or whatever. Like, that's the least of that game's problems with Redfall. God, Redfall. I you know. A couple of weeks of disappointment here, you know, but at least the Star Wars one feels like something that they can eventually sort out. Like, that's one that you at least look at it and go like, well, once they're on the other side of this, then this will probably be awesome, because I have had a great time with this game, and I know that great time is in there somewhere. They just need to clear away the gunk so that I can see it a little more clearly. Redfall does not have that going for it. Let's crack this open before it gets too warm. My wife called me from the store. She said, they got a bunch of weird energy drinks I've never seen before. Do you want me to get you any? And I said, absolutely. And so she grabbed me a handful of drinks. This is the first one I grabbed out of that batch. It's just called 3D. I don't know. It's Liberty Pop flavored 3D. Little red, white, and blue can, god damn it. I don't know if it's the Dudley Boys drink. I don't know. Am I gonna crack this open and it's gonna be like, ugh, smells like Bubba. Oh, why do I hate everything coming out of this thing's mouth? Oh, it's Bubba Ray. So yeah, we're going to crack open this 3D and see what it's all about. I don't really know. Smells like a generic mix of fruit flavors. Smells nice and sweet. Generic, I would say. Generic in that same way that, like, but it's in the same vein as the Bomb Pop, Rocket Pop, some of these other flavors of just like generic popsicle fruit popsicle thing. It's got a solidly strong flavor, and not a lot of back end aftertaste to it. It tastes like a diet soda. Like you get the kind of diet soda sort of mouth feel. This is fine. This is fine. A little tangy, a little tart on the end. But pretty decent. I don't know. Like this flavor itself, the kind of bomb pop, missile pop, whatever kind of flavor that these drinks are going for, is not really one of my favorites to begin with. But this works out okay. Yeah, this is absolutely fine. You could drink this. That's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty decent. Let's get Devon. Get the list. Okay. Here's our list of 104 different beverages. Where does this one rate? This is not bad. I would take it over a rainbow sherbet, which is a similar kind of similar conceptual sort of drink. I think it's better than Hype Sauce. It's better than the Watermelon Warlord. It's better than the C4 Arctic Snow Cone taste-wise, but C4, I think C4's kind of got it going on when it comes to what they're doing energy-wise. They're doing pretty good. I think in terms of, it's pretty similar to the Skittles drink in a lot of ways, but is it better than Rise Fuel Kool-Aid Tropical Punch? Yes. Yes. But is it better than Prime Energy Tropical Punch? That's the question. Is your heart okay after all this? It's John asked me that yesterday on the podcast that he does. I've it's been a little bit since I've been looked at by a doctor, but yes, within the last 12 months I've been looked at and checked out, and they're like, yeah, man, you're doing fine. These things end up having somewhere between 200 and 300 milligrams of caffeine. It's, if you're going to Starbucks every morning and getting some massive, one of their big large drinks and adding shots into it and all that other stuff, like you get up to that, you get up in that range pretty quickly. So it's really not that far off. And then it's kind of the only caffeine I have during the day, really. I'll have like a soda in the evening, maybe a little Diet Dr. Pepper or something, but yeah, my doctor, Dr. Conrad Traxway, says fine. He said this is the most mild stuff you could be drinking. He said that there's much harsher stuff. In fact, he offered to get me on some of the harsh stuff, and I was like, I don't need it, man. My nose is a little itchy. Huh. That's yeah, it's been a little bit since there's been any kind of like physical manifestations off of drinking these. This is a really nondescript can, so I don't really know, so many of these things are like, it's got L-carnitine or whatever else, but this is just like, I don't know, this is a mystery. It's got a bunch of B6 in it from the looks of it. Okay, we're going to put that right there. It's our new number 27. That's a lot better than I thought. This has like
generic gas station energy drink written all over it. This has fly-by-night energy drink that's gone in 3 months. Written all over it, and so I did not have high expectations going into this, but this is pretty solid. This is pretty solid. So yeah, congratulations to our new number 27. Anyway, getting back to it. I have been playing a little bit of Humanity, which is the upcoming game that Enhance is putting out. There was a demo for this a little while ago. I'm trying to figure out, because I know that they announced a release date for this, right? Yeah, May 16th. So that's pretty close. It's got VR. I have not been playing it in VR. In fact, I have been playing it on Steam Deck a fair amount here. This is the game where it's kind of harkening back to that PlayStation 1 era of puzzle games, the kind of intelligent cubes of the world, the devil dices of the world, where it's just, here's a bunch of big cubes and you're kind of leading people around in a choo-choo rocket-esque kind of way. Whereas the people just are spawning somewhere and they just walk straight. And it's up to you to get in their path and plop down icons that will make them change direction, or it will make them jump. And so you are trying to lead them to the exit and stop them from walking off the ledges to their death over and over again, and so on and so forth. And I have not gotten super deep into it, but I have been kind of chewing through it and messing around with it has a level editor in it as well. And that seems like it'll be really fun. It has a whole system in place for seeing other people's levels, rating other people's levels, favoriting creators, like all of that sort of stuff. That seems like it'll be really cool. It's a very chill, I don't know, it's a very straightforward sort of thing. Like, that's kind of it. It's I have not played into it deeply enough that I think I've uncovered every single mechanic it has, because it does kind of roll that stuff out over time to make it a little bit more complicated. But Humanity, it is a very straightforward puzzle game. And it's got a nice look to it. And I think that goes a long way. So yeah, if I think when it got first announced, it was a little bit ambiguous, and there's been a demo. So if you've played the demo, then you know what it is, I think. But I had not messed with the demo much, because I thought of it as a VR game, and I was like, well, I don't want to get the VR heads. I don't want to hook all this stuff up and do all the. But it is perfectly playable outside of VR. In fact, I might say that's probably. I have not tried it in VR, but playing it outside of VR, I'm like, this is a great thing. This is great. And again, this seems like it'll be a really awesome Steam Deck kind of game. You just fire it up, knock out a couple of levels before bed, that sort of thing, or go check on your levels, see if people are liking them, go play some other user created levels, whatever else. And that's been pretty good. Can you pet the dog is of course the first question. You are the dog. So one cannot pet oneself. It simply does not work that way. But yes, I will say, they're saying it's going to have 90 stages in its story mode and stuff, and it gets complicated fast. So if you're not up for that, but I don't know, it looks like it has some kind of boss confrontation. Like I said, I'm fairly early on in it, but it sounds like it has some kind of larger levels that are larger in scope and some crazier stuff going on, as well as you get into it later on. There's an animated GIF of what appears to be some kind of boss fight on the Steam page for it, that I have not seen that yet, but yes, go give Humanity a look. It also has a very fun trailer that they put out that is worth taking a look at too. Enhance is publishing that. It's from a company called, is it THA Limited? The Limited? Or is that an L? Man. Anyway. Yeah, they've got a page up on Steam. It's also coming to PlayStation. I think that's it. Is it also? Maybe it's also coming to. Anyway, perhaps it is coming to Switch as well. I don't have that information in front of me. And the last game I'll talk about here is Combat Master. I streamed some Combat Master last week. If you saw that, I am enthralled. This is what I was talking about with Redfall. When I say that Redfall, there's nothing about it that's good enough or bad enough to be worth discussing. Combat Master is worth discussing, but maybe not necessarily because it's good. But I am having a lot of fun with it. It's free. It's on Steam. It is a mobile game. First and foremost, it is a mobile game that they have put out on Steam, and so there's some controller configuration that you have to do in order to make it seem, something resembling normal on PC. It is a first-person shooter. It is a game that you can tell that the developers of it sat down and looked at Call of Duty quite a bit and said, can we make one of those for phones? Without maybe realizing that the Activision was already making one of those for phones, but that didn't stop them. They've gone right ahead, and so yeah, it's a competitive first-person shooter with a battle pass and skins and gun attachments and all of this other stuff that is again as kind of direct parallels to Call of Duty in a lot of ways. But it's this skittery, jittery, weird mess. The movement is so twitchy, crazy. There's just something about it that feels so broken, but also it's really enthralling. And I have found myself going, not for a long period of time, but I keep coming back to it. I keep coming back to Combat Master and playing like 3 or 4 matches and then quitting and doing something else. And then like the next day I'll be like, well, maybe I'll fuck around with Combat Master a little bit. And so it's this kind of, it has a very low budget vibe. And it's the sort of game that, when, 2 generations ago would have come out at full price from a studio who's like, we think we can take Call of Duty down a notch. But here it is. It's a free thing. And it's pretty good for what it is, I guess I would say. They have one mode in there that is kind of unique. The rest of it is like, hey, it's got deathmatch, team deathmatch. It's got domination, I think. No, it doesn't. It has search and destroy, I guess, which is, going to be a little more Counter-Strike-y or something in some ways. But it'll be like S&D it'll be like S&D, if you know what I mean. What? But there is a mode called Combat Master. And in this mode, they just put out a patch saying that they had raised the player count to 10 players from like 6, I think is what it was before, which is hilarious. Combat Master mode is like they sat down and said, can we make a battle royale mode without making larger maps and without raising the player count? And so it's like a 6-player battle royale mode that is set on the same maps as the deathmatch mode and all the other stuff. And they give you 3 lives, so you do respawn a few times. It's free for all. It's not a team game, so it's 6 players all fighting for themselves. And occasionally weapon boxes will appear on the map. You spawn with nothing. You're just fists. And so you run up to these weapon boxes and punch them so that guns pop out. And then you just equip random guns. You don't get a ton of bullets for them. And then you like have to fend off, you have to stay alive. You also have armor in this mode, which you slot in a very Call of Duty-like animation. And it's kind of a neat idea because it's so low stakes. Like, the frustrating thing that happens in a battle royale game is that you spend 20 minutes waiting in the lobby jumping out of the plane, landing, getting your gear, getting some stuff together. Maybe you win like 1 or 2 early fights, and then you get into the shit, boom, done. Like, fuck, all right, back to the lobby, go back, do this, get back in, and go through that whole process again. The downtime between matches is it's a deterrent, honestly. And maybe if you're better at these games, then you're having longer sessions and you don't agree with me. But I sometimes have sessions where I lose the first fight I get into, and it's like, fuck. It's super discouraging because of the downtime between, like, okay, I've got to re-queue, get back in the lobby, wait for it to load, go through the 30-second countdown, wait for the plane animation, wait to jump out of the plane, go do this again, until you're finally back in the shit. And this just drops you right into shit immediately. And I think that they're onto something with this mode. It's like they're kind of splitting the difference, right? Where it's like it's sort of like the battle royale kind of thing, but it's not a closing circle. It's not like you're not hiding in a bathroom. You know, it has like deathmatch style tension to it, not battle royale style tension to it. And it's fun. It's just fun. And the shooting is awkward and goofy and weird and messy enough that it's just a janky game. Janky top to bottom. But it's like it kind of has heart somewhere in there, in with all that jank. And I appreciate that. I appreciate what they're going for. It's just a bizarre little thing. So give Combat Master a look. You'll have to, if you're going to play it with a controller on PC, which is how I recommend it. For me, the defaults, like it was like when you want to aim down sights, it's set to toggle instead of hold, and so there's some other kind of janky things there that you might want to reconfigure. But you know, for a free to play competitive first person shooter, it ain't bad. It's kind of fun. It's silly, I guess I'll say. The jank works in its favor. Where you're like, oh, that's a missing texture. When that grenade blew up, a big blue box appeared. Or it seems like if you just tap the grenade button, you almost just drop it at your feet. You're like, oh shit, what the fuck? Like, it still goes through this busted looking throwing animation, and then the grenade just goes onto the ground in front of you. You're like, fuck, what the fuck just happened? And so it's goofy, man. I don't know. You could do a lot worse, I guess. And I appreciate it for on that level, I guess. And so I guess I would say fuck with it a little bit. Give it a look. It's like a gig. It'll take you a second to download it, you know, just and fire it up and give it a look. And you know, but they're doing battle passes and selling skins and all this other stuff. So you know, that's the route they're going. And I think it has crossplay. I'm not positive, but I imagine the sort of scenario where if you did get matched up with players on who were on mobile, you would fucking decimate them. So, and I don't know. I feel like I've really torn some people up from a distance in ways that I'm like, oh, was that guy on a phone? Because he sure couldn't turn around. I don't know. It was a silly good time. And I've been dipping back into Meet Your Maker. They put out a trailer that appears to have a new trap in it, and so they're still going along. They sent me. I gave out a key to the game to the Gerstmann advisory panel on the Discord there the other day because they sent me that. They sent me a box of silly stuff, and they sent me some coasters. This one, I don't know if you can see it, but this coaster, it says Meet Your Maker on it. I don't know. So thanks to them for the coaster. I'm using the coaster, which I'm not really a big coaster guy, but seeing how the coaster life treats me. Meet Your Maker, you know, they're out there answering questions, you know, like people are asking them the right questions, like, hey, are you going to change it so that people have to beat their own base before they can submit it? And they're saying no, but also kind of giving a good answer as to why. that kind of makes sense. And I'm really curious to see how Meet Your Maker develops from here, because obviously they've got their ideas about like, oh, well, we've got a new trap, we've got this, and they've got their roadmap for new stuff. But like there are things, and it seems like they are maybe searching for the answers a little bit as well, because they launched a big survey that popped up when you launched the game, or you can opt into it. It didn't force you into it or anything, but they had a big long survey that was asking all of the right questions about like, how do you feel about the story in this? Do you care about the chimera, or do you feel about, how do you feel about all of this other stuff? Or how do you feel the building is like rewarding enough? Or how do you feel about progression? And like, those are my big problems with the game, or like, there's too much cruft. There's too much shit around the edges that you're just like, I don't know why I'm pushing this button to level up this guy to do this, and you've got 5 different meters and this, and none of this matters. Progression feels very slight, and it also feels spread too thin. And there's just a lot of things like that. And yeah, when you make a really great level, you eventually, I think, what is it? Is level 10 the highest prestige? Eventually they make you retire a level once it's seen enough action. Which, I don't know. That doesn't, the idea of like, well, I've got to spend currency to put my thing back, to put my base back online so that people can play it. I have to spend a currency to upload it. I would think they would be like, hey, if your base is doing well and people seem to like it, we're going to leave it up because we want people to experience good levels. Like, I would think that would be the thing. Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of room for a lot of different tweaks in Meet Your Maker that will kind of smooth out that experience, both for raiders and builders. But I think they're really onto something. I think it's like Meet Your Maker is such a really great idea, and I think it's a lot of fun. But it needs to be kind of, it needs to be smoothed out. And the like I said, the survey seems like they're at least asking the right questions. And we'll see where they get to with it over time. I hope that they, because I think the other problem people have had with that game is like they're playing user created levels that are, like people are calling them kill boxes. It's just like, here's an impossible scenario full of bad enemies and full of just a mess. And like, hey, what are you doing to ban those? And then they're right, because they're like, well, we don't want to put any negative. It's the reason why, the downward thumb got taken out of some place. Like the down voting is they want to have like, hey, if you like it, say why. If you don't like it, keep it moving, and we'll deduce what we need to deduce from there. They have other data points they can use to figure out if a level is bad without having a dislike button in there somewhere. And I think they're right to do that. But again, it's an interesting, the Q&A they did, I think was interesting to kind of get a look at where their mindset is with the game, and the survey at least seems to imply that they are asking the right questions. Me personally, I would yank all of the story and stuff out of it and have something that's even thinner than what's there now, because I think a lot of that stuff just kind of gets in the way and is just goofy. I don't know. Like, I would find an easier way to, or a smoother track to unlock traps and unlock things. They probably also need to figure out how to do progression, because some people might only like to build and not raid, and vice versa. And so they need to make sure that stuff is balanced out, either by completely separating those two progressions in a more formal way or something, right? But I guess the good news is that they seem to be asking those questions, and we'll see where they get to with it. Yeah, it's definitely a game I have it installed everywhere, and I do kind of keep checking back in on it from time to time, but it's a game I think I would be playing more of if the edges were smoothed off of it a little bit in terms of menus and progression and everything. If that stuff was just better, I think I would probably be coming back to it a little more often than I am. But yeah. Now, how about we get into the news? They're going to make a Vampire Survivors cartoon. They're making an animated TV show. We don't call them cartoons anymore. Is that this story comes to us from Deadline.com, and a company called Story Kitchen is partnering with the creator of the game, Luca Galante, to adapt it into what they're calling to adapt the comedic gothic horror video game into a premium animated television series. And then they've got this lore for the game that I'm like, oh, right. In the game described as Vox Machina meets Castlevania, players control an automatically attacking character while fighting against continuous waves of monsters, with the goal being to survive for as long as possible. The game is set in 2021 in rural Italy. There lived an evil person named Bisconte Draculo, whose many evil magics created a bad world filled with famine and suffering. It's now up to the members of the Belpaese family to end his reign of terror and return good food to the table, reads the official description. I love the idea of Deadline having to treat this storyline as if it's like, oh, here's what this game's about. Here's what what's Vampire Survivors about? They are looking for a writer, and the project will be shopped to animated TV network buyers. So it's not necessarily that it's been picked up just yet. Story Kitchen co-founder Dimitri M. Johnson said, when our head of creative Dan Jevons flagged Vampire Survivors for us last year upon its initial release, we were prepared to dismiss it as just another vampire game. Hundreds of hours played later, we were all hooked and we could just not get enough. Needless to say, we're truly honored to partner with this incredible team and to continue the Vampire Survivors story. There is lore to it. I'm not saying that they did not write some stuff to go into Vampire Survivors, but also, what? This quote from the, oh my God, the quote from Luca Galante here. The most important thing in Vampire Survivors is the story. So it's a dream come true to see what started as a little indie game I made on my weekends come to life as an animated TV show. Oh yeah, the most important thing in Vampire Survivors is the story. That's very good. That's extremely great. That's a perfect thing for him to say. Oh man. It's also great to be partnering up with such experienced and talented people to make the show. I do wonder if they've realized that there isn't a single vampire in Vampire Survivors though. Oh man. That's amazing. So Story Kitchen is so the founder of this Story Kitchen studio is like the writer, I guess, is billed as the creator of John Wick, and also the producer of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which I've seen the name Dan Jevons before. I know he was affiliated with the Sonic movie in some way, getting that going. This is all very funny and very perfect. And I hope that this happens. I hope they turn this into a story. I hope that this lasts 100 seasons. And I don't know what that would even be. I hope that this is the knock-on after effects of Sonic making as much money as it did, and now Mario making as much as it did. This is going to, we're gonna see video game IP. We're due for another round of video game IP being optioned for TV and movies that never happened. You remember like the heady days of like, we're making an Asteroids movie, or the when the Tetris movie was being talked about 10 years ago or whatever, and then now something finally did happen on that front, which is hilarious. The very idea that Vampire Survivors is being thought of as an animated series, I think, is hysterical and amazing. But also, the Vampire Survivors, like, they could do anything with that. And they were like, here's a vampire cartoon. It could be anything. As long as it's got, like, I don't know, we found a garlic and then that made some kind of radius appear around, like, I don't know. I don't know what you do with that. But, what other ass games would be right for television? What animated series do we want to see out of another auto shooting survival game? Like, what, is it just time wasters ripe for, the animated treatment? I don't know. But yes, Hentai Survivors is already perfect. Yes, Hentai Hollow Cure, the animated series. Why not? There is a trailer for the Gran Turismo movie out, and I watched that this morning. And it literally, they liked this sentence so much that it's in the trailer twice. It opens with this as like a little teaser for what's about to come, and then it says it again later, where it says, if you hit the wall in the game, you just push reset. If you hit it in real life, you could die. It's like, fuck off. It's perfect. It's perfect. It is it's a remake of The Wizard. Oh no, I don't know. It might as well be a remake of the fucking Wizard. But it's the storyline for this is well known. Like they had announced this before. And the story is some kid plays a bunch of Gran Turismo, and then like there's like the scenes in the trailer look hilarious because it looks like fake. You look at it and go like, this is if you were out there making a fake Gran Turismo movie trailer for YouTube because you just had a bunch of friends who were bored, this is what you would make. 100%. And they don't need to make this into a full movie. They will. They are. It's out in August. But the trailer is funny enough. And it's based on a true story. But the idea is like, it's a kid, and there's like scenes in there where he's at the dinner table and they're like, oh, you play your video games. Why do you only care about car racing? You know how expensive that is? We can't afford that. It's like the implication of like, it's a poor family. They can't, they can't afford to get into auto racing. It's so expensive. But then there's a tournament, a Gran Turismo tournament. And the guy who plays Gran Turismo all the time wins the tournament and he gets to go race in real life. And then, he's got to train for real life. And there's a guy, saying like, oh, these kids are going to end up dead. This 200 miles an hour. They could, and like just this stupidest shit. So good. And then they show the main character, like, I don't know, kissing a girl and at a party. And so that he's going to be torn between two worlds. And just like that movie fucking writes itself, man. It seems like the most generic, like you just look at it and you're like, yeah, man, I don't know. 30 years ago, Tom Cruise would have been this kid or whatever, it's like just so, sure, they should absolutely make it. But you just look at it and you just go like, yeah, I don't know. It's a story of a kid overcoming adversity and becoming the greatest real life racer of all time or whatever. Maybe he doesn't, because if they want to keep it somewhat based on a true story, I don't think that guy is exactly tearing up the real world circuits. But it's like, here's everyone running on the track because and they're like, it's 140 degrees in that cockpit and you'll be pulling G's. You need to be in shape. And, here's a kid throwing up on the track because he can't handle it. And it's just, the scenes in the trailer just like fall out. Like, I feel like if you read the log line of kid good at Gran Turismo wins tournament, becomes real life car racer, this entire movie just falls out of you. Not that I'm a screenwriter, obviously there's an art to writing it and getting all, but I feel like just scenes would start falling out of your body if you've seen enough movies over the years, right? Where you're just like, oh, I don't know, you need, he's got to train because it's different to be in a real car than it is in a fake car, and so he's got to be ready for that. And he's got a rival on the track, and the rival's trying to get him hurt, and he's like, oh man, rubbing his racing in real life, that's way more dangerous. What's gonna happen? And and just it is a hilarious trailer. It is hysterical. I don't have any serious interest in seeing the film. I feel like I feel like that movie, I just wrote 3 different versions of that movie in my head. So but they found a way to make it happen, right? I mean, like, better that than to be like, at least it's based on something resembling a true story, right? And they're like, oh no, like, this has sort of happened in real life to a certain extent, and people have played the game to get good at real racing and whatever else, and there is a pathway there, and we can sensationalize that story and make that happen. You're like, yeah, sure, of course, because like, yeah, otherwise, like, if like, what else would it be? If you were to write a story that took place in the world of Gran Turismo, as opposed to acknowledging that Gran Turismo is a video game, then I don't know what that is. Because what is Gran Turismo? There's nothing. You went to the weird cafe, and an old man told you a long-winded story about a car while jazz played. I think you make that a scene in this movie, and then have this guy go like, "Whatever, old man," and then get up and burn, and then fucking blow up out of there, right? I don't know. It's strange. That's not whatever. It's not strange. But it's the right kind of dumb. Like I said, if you watch that trailer, I feel like you will have seen. You will know what that movie is probably going. And maybe they have some twists and turns in there, huh? But you watch that trailer, it just feels like a joke. It feels like a bit. We were talking about this was from the emails last week. Someone wrote in and said, "Hey, what's up? All these players who are playing Street Fighter 6 ahead of release, and people." Like, obviously there was that closed beta that they ran for Street Fighter 6 a while ago, and people found ways to like mod that beta to make it so they could keep playing it after it shut down. And I think they modded it so that you could play 2-player local and whatever else. And so people were saying like, hey, that seems like a lot of extra practice someone will have that might give them an unfair advantage in a tournament setting. What should they do? And my reaction was like, they should ban those people from playing in the tournaments if they catch them. Capcom has issued an update. This comes to us from a Eurogamer about the old CBT. On the old CBT. Saying that players who access Street Fighter 6 outside of the designated period may be banned from competitive play. They basically just posted a screenshot to Twitter. It has come to our attention that some users have been accessing the CBT software and playing the game outside of the designated period. This is a violation of the CBT terms of service. It's always important to have very rigid terms of service around your CBT. You want to be clear about everything there. You don't want to leave anything up to chance. It can be seen as violation of the Capcom Pro Tour Code of Conduct. That's the CPT. Totally different. For the avoidance of doubt, from this point forward, any player who is shown with clear evidence to be accessing the CBT in an unauthorized way may be deemed ineligible for the upcoming Capcom Pro Tour and Street Fighter League seasons. We appreciate your cooperation and understanding in helping maintain the fairness and competitive integrity of our competitions. That's the right move, I think. It's they're not going to go back, and anyone who was showing it before, they're not going to ban them. So I think in the end, this doesn't really do much, but it is probably the best they can do reasonably. But also, again, they just had a bunch of people come up and play the game recently, so there were players, people that got invited to that event and people who didn't. And what does that do? Is that fair? Is that, where does that lie? What about people who get early copies of the game from Capcom for one reason or another? Are they banned? There's just kind of, there's not a really great way to lock all of this down in a way that is truly fair. So this feels like in a lot of ways, it's sort of the best they can do. And it's probably the bare minimum that they should do, to keep people from at least blabbing about it and advertising like, hey, did you know you can crack the beta and do all that? Like, at least this scares some of those folks to fucking keep it under your hat, dumbass. Yeah. So they did that. We've got some non-news of the Titanfall 3 variety. This comes from some kind of interview with Barron's. The PC Gamer has plucked this out of. Vince Zampella would love for there to be a Titanfall 3. He would love it. But he would hate to say yes, because then people latch onto that and then skewer you when it doesn't come. But I would love to see it happen, is the real answer. So, then he went on to clarify that they are not working on anything currently, and there are no exact dedicated plans for that. So that would imply that there is no pure Titanfall sequel on their roadmap. It's not like when the Star Wars shooter comes out, then we're rolling everyone right onto Titanfall 3. What he's saying is that there's nothing in the works. They're not currently working. Obviously, there are, people in that company working on skunkworks weird things over time, and and maybe something like that comes along. But yeah, and it seems like it's something that he's thought a lot about. It has to be the right thing. It's such a beloved franchise for the fans and also for us. If it's not the right moment in time, the right idea, then it just doesn't make sense. And also, there's how do you do something that doesn't confuse people that are Apex fans but not necessarily Titanfall fans yet? It's a hard question to answer. You just put out a game and call it Titanfall 3, and you give Apex players bonus cosmetics in Titanfall 3 to inspire them to play it. So this is kind of the pat answer he's been giving for a while, and it's the reality of it, right? But like, what is the right moment in time? What is what do you, and I guess my question is like, do you think that the sky's ever clear in a specific way that actually make them say, no, now is the right time for a Titanfall sequel? And maybe it's one of those things where they're waiting for the right idea that pushes it forward in a way. Because if they made Titanfall again, if they made another Titanfall 2, a sequel to Titanfall 2 that was largely similar, like I would fucking fall out of this chair. I'd be excited. I would be the jumping up man clapping at the movie review place. I would be like, because I would love for there to be more new Titanfall. But I also tend to agree that, like, at this point, it's been long enough, right? That I think if you just did that, then that's not a sales success. The Titanfall track record, and you can attribute a lot of things outside of their control to the Titanfall sales story. I think, those other Titanfall games were often positioned as spoilers for Call of Duty or like other franchises, like trying to, the same way that Medal of Honor reboot was just like, if we can just peel some people off of Call of Duty so it doesn't sell quite as well, but what we really care about is Battlefield. And so this is almost a diversionary video game specifically out there to fuck people over, which is kind of how Medal of Honor felt at a time, and kind of how Titanfall rolled out as well. Just bad release windows, just bad lanes for to have a competitive shooter succeed against such entrenched competition. So I guess, like, yeah, then you start to wonder, like, well, what do you really do with Titanfall to bring it back? And I think you need a big idea, you need a big change. It's not necessarily like, oh, the competitive multiplayer has to change, but like you need some kind of new hook that makes it stand out in the market in a way that, like, because at this point also you would be putting out Titanfall 3. And so you're putting out a thing that, like, if you look at the sales story, a lot of people have said no to now twice. And so you would I would say, if you do eventually do a new Titanfall game, you probably don't call it Titanfall 3. You probably call it Titanfall : something, to, not put a very scary big number 3 on it. You find ways to tastefully tie it into the Apex franchise, because that's where all the heat is right now. So you figure out, like, oh, is it characters from the Apex franchise now in these stories? And then that, of course, probably, after thinking that, which I'm sure that they thought of, that probably got them to the point where they were like, oh, why don't we just build this into Apex? And, there was some stuff that they were working on there that they moved away from. And so it becomes like, okay, well, is this something we should just build into Apex because we want to keep those numbers up and keep that going? And, maybe you could. Who cares? As long as it plays like Titanfall, I would be all for it. It could be a mode in Apex. I don't give a shit, man. It could be a mode in fucking Star Wars Jedi. Like, fucking, hey, man, if you reinstall Need for Speed and fucking click on the front wheel of this car, it turns into Titanfall. I don't give, sure, man, fucking whatever it takes, whatever hoop I got to jump through to fucking make more Titanfall happen, I'm there. But like, yeah, I think that there probably is that larger question that, it's not a fun one to talk about because, I think Titanfall 2 is so near and dear to a lot of people's hearts that you don't want to think about it in any kind of way of like, well, it's not like that game burned up the sales charts or whatever. But like, that's the reality of it is, this is Electronic Arts. What are they going to spend their money on? What are they going to invest in? What return on that investment are they expecting in terms of sales? And then how do you build a Titanfall game that meets those requirements? It's as simple as that. And by simple as that, I mean, I don't fucking know how to do any of that. And so it becomes a matter of like, do you hit upon the right idea that gets everyone very excited about Titanfall again? Like, no, if we did this will be a thing that everyone, it's like, we made a mech game that is also a Dark Souls, which apparently that's been done. But like, yeah, what do you do with that campaign? What do you do with that single player experience? What do you do with your multiplayer there? How do you make all that make sense from a business perspective so that you can get the money to go off and make it happen? It's the reality of all this shit. I'm curious to see what Gravity Well is going to end up doing. That's the studio. This one of the studios from ex Respawn folks. I think they're running a fairly small team. I don't know what they're working on. And I doubt it's a Titanfall game, but or a mech, a robot suit, robot jocks themed a competitive shooter, but I'd be curious to see what they're working on and all of that stuff as well. But yeah, I don't know. Titanfall 2 is an all-timer. It's just a legendary video game. Like, fuck sales, fuck all that stuff. Like remove that aspect from it. It is one of the greatest games of all time. Period. And it's a shame that it's in the state that it is in. Officially, you can obviously download server mods and play the game online still. People have kind of taken up that work, but that doesn't help console players, and it's a shame. Because I like playing that game with a controller, and when you play on PC custom servers with a controller, you get fucking wrecked. So yeah, something needs to be done. Something has to happen. That game deserves it. That franchise deserves it. It needs another entry. I think the competitive shooter landscape is so weird right now that, I don't know how you do it, but I feel like something out of the ordinary could punch through in a way that it didn't when Titanfall 2 was coming out, and couldn't when Titanfall 2 was coming out. I don't know, but like, people seem restless with Call of Duty in a way that they haven't been in a while. But like, if that's your player base, if you're like, well, we're the game that's going to come out and people are going to play this when they're either tired of Call of Duty or while they're waiting for Call of Duty, it's not a great place to be in. And so how do you beat that? Like, that's the same question that X Defiant is going to have to answer. Like any other game that comes out and kind of lives in this lane of that style of competitive shooting. Not that obviously, Titanfall's got giant fucking robot suits. It's got wall running. It's got all this cool movement shit. But like, at the end of the day, it still fits into that slot. Mostly. Yeah, it's a good point. People are talking about Killzone in the chat right now. And yeah, man, how and why do you make a new Killzone in this day and age? I would look at it as like, you make one because, the owner of the other console is about to, is probably still going to find a way to lock up Call of Duty. And so you'd better have something of your own. And I would, I don't know. I would love to see a new Killzone. I don't think we're going to get that anytime soon, especially not from Guerrilla, because in the process of kind of confirming some personnel moves, they kind of also said like, yes, the future of Aloy and her adventures. And you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, of course. You're just going to be the Horizon studio from here on out, which makes sense in the context of like, Killzone kind of wore out its welcome. Remember that one that launched alongside the PS4 that didn't have a number on? I was like, was that Shadowhawk? What the fuck was that Killzone? Now I got to look it up. If it's Shadowhawk, everyone owes me $7. Shadowfall, close enough. Give me $4.50. I did not much care for that game compared to the previous Killzone games. It was cool on its own, but it was a different thing, and I kind of liked what Killzone was in Killzone 2. And then Killzone 3 was less successful at that, for sure. But yeah, Shadowfall didn't really do it for me. It had the robot hawk in it though, right? Anyway. Just to put it on the record here, hey, they should make another Titanfall. I think they should make another Titanfall. That's my bold stance. Crazy, I know. And if not another Titanfall, I would love to see another shooter of that size and scope. And I know that some of that stuff I need to reinstall Apex because it's been a while since I have played Apex Legends, and I know that they have added additional modes and done a lot to that game that maybe I should get back into it, or at least give it a fresh look, because it has been a while. But I'm finding myself not that drawn to battle royale games, at least shooters. Rumbleverse was a hell of a game. I would happily play more Rumbleverse. I would punch somebody in the stomach to play some more Rumbleverse. God damn it. But yeah, you know, the kind of traditional battle royale thing is not really doing it for me the way it maybe used to. And so I don't know. I would like to see more kind of standard competitive shooters and see more games. For as much as I, you know, didn't love my time with X Defiant, I at least like that there are other things coming out. You know, some alternatives, just to see if anyone hits on any kind of winning formula here or whatever. But yeah. PlayStation VR 2, remember that thing? They put it out. It's out there. Well, it's not out there. It's in their warehouse. You can buy one from their warehouse. But that is about to change, because on May 12th, you will be able to buy a PlayStation VR 2 headset at retail. This is in the UK at Game, but also here in the States from Best Buy and GameStop. They have listings up now. We'll see if this does anything. This feels like a bad way to do this. Not that the reviews for the PlayStation VR 2 were negative. In fact, they were quite positive. But I feel like there has not been any heat on that device since its launch. It was something people talked about the week of a release, and I was, you know, like, hey man, Gran Turismo in VR is cool. It made me want to become a real race car driver. And then I realized that it gets to be 140 degrees in that cockpit, and I realized that if you crash into a wall in the game, you can just push reset. But if you crash into a wall in real life, you could die. And so PlayStation VR 2 seems like the way to go on that front. It splits the difference. It's a happy medium, I think. And I feel like the PlayStation VR 2 vanished after launch week. I have seen almost no discussion of it online. I feel like no one is talking about it. No one cares, really. It just kind of came out. Everyone reviewed it, and everyone said, like, yeah, this is nice. This is well made. And then no one thought about it ever again. And that's bad. And the lack of heat around it makes me wonder, like, now that they're bringing it to retail, will anyone care? Like, people have had the opportunity to buy one for a few months now. It didn't even sell out at launch, so it wasn't like it was hard to get one. You just had to get one through the mail. Is someone going to make an impulse buy at $550 about, like, oh, you mean I can walk down to a Best Buy and have one right now? Let's go. Like, I that doesn't seem like a scenario that exists. And so this just feels, I don't know, that like that device, that ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, feels dead to me already. And obviously there are still games that have not come out, and there are still things happening, but like I just, like I said, it feels like a thing that just absolutely came and went. I think a lot of the things I had to say about it back then, in terms of like, hey, it's VR on a closed system, and so it's really hard for you to do all the fun, weird stuff that makes VR exciting, because it can't hook up to a PC where people are doing crazy shit with VR all the time. And so that's kind of an issue. But yeah, this thing will be out in May. It's out at stores in May if you feel the need to buy one that way. But you could obviously go get one direct from Sony right now. You could place that order. Well, operators are standing by, I guess. I don't know. And then in June, Facebook is going to have an event, a VR-focused event, where they're going to be talking about, I think they've said as much as they're going to talk about new games and stuff for VR, but they may also, maybe this would be when they would start to announce new headsets. I don't know. New VR headsets. Whatever, man. Like, sure. I like VR, but this is ridiculous. We'll see how all that goes. The United Kingdom's antitrust. Oh God! Stop making noise. Auto playing video, you nightmare monster. The CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK, has decided to block the merger of Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. There is an appeal process that Microsoft and Activision are both like, well, we're going to appeal. This will go through. Don't worry. Like, they're trying to be very reassuring across the board about this stuff and say like, hey, we will fight this. We will find a way to make this happen. The hang up seemed to be around the cloud business, where the worry was that having Microsoft acquire Call of Duty, some of these other games and studios, and be able to put them on their cloud service was the thing, the competition they were, the monopoly that they're stepping in to prevent here, which that feels like a really bad read of the state of things. But they did look at it as like, well, Google didn't have Call of Duty, and look at them. They went out of business. And it's like, no one had fucking Call of Duty. No one has Call of Duty on their cloud service. Yet. It doesn't fucking exist yet. Like, Google failed for a lot of reasons. Call of Duty is not one of them. And so, yes, this weird hang up on the cloud gaming thing being like, this fledgling new space, we don't want to have anyone get their hooks in it too deep too soon. And we're worried that, and we think that if Microsoft had this, had Call of Duty on their cloud service, that it would be too good for them to have, or whatever. It would prevent competition in the cloud space. Meanwhile, Microsoft has been around signing all of these cloud deals, trying to get its games onto competing cloud services in a way to sort of appease this. Activision itself is not in the cloud game at all. Like I said, their games don't appear on these services. This would be the first thing, and so again, this feels very... It feels very misguided to me. Like the things they're citing as reasons why the deal shouldn't happen feel very thrown together to me, or just feel like very I don't know, poorly researched, just incorrect. Just a certain amount of just like, oh, you are a bunch of weird people who don't understand the video game business in any way, shape, or form, and don't understand how any of this works, and so that's why you're like scared by all of this. Like, so anyway, there will be an appeal. And the other one that Bloomberg cites here is that the merger agreement expires on July 18th. They could theoretically extend that agreement, but right now, if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't close by July 18th, Activision could theoretically walk away from the deal with $3 billion of Microsoft's money as a breakup fee. Which, hey, that's a good chunk of change. I don't know. And so, yeah, this then creates a scenario where when they initially announced this, they were like, we think that this deal will close sometime in the second half of 2023, maybe in the summer. And now we're at a point that's like, well, that timetable ain't fucking happening anymore. And if this does still manage to happen, it probably doesn't close until next year. Bloomberg does say that the UK appeals process is drawn out and rarely changes the outcome, as the tribunal only reviews the decision's legality. When Meta appealed a UK order to unwind its acquisition of Giphy, for example, the tribunal took 8 months to issue a decision. Yeah, I don't know. This this has got to be a point where things start to get very ugly for Microsoft on this end, because I think that they were very much like, oh yeah, I think that they were accounting for a certain amount of roadblocks along the way, but they were figuring like, yeah, we think we can clear this. We'll do what it takes. And then to have this land like this, I'm sure is like, oh, fuck. Oh shit. And so this has led to some meetings inside of Microsoft, also according to Bloomberg. Let's see here. Microsoft Gaming, Thursday morning at an all-hands meeting, Microsoft Gaming chief Phil Spencer acknowledged the company's disappointment, saying the UK's decision will slow the approval process, according to a person who attended the meeting. Still, he said Microsoft's desire to pursue the deal hasn't wavered. Spencer also told staffers that Microsoft President Brad Smith was up at 2 a.m. Seattle time drafting a response to the UK's CMA, and that he and Chief Financial Officer Amy Hood, who oversees acquisitions, held a senior leadership meeting the same day. Spencer also reportedly said in this internal meeting that the acquisition was intended to speed up Microsoft's gaming plans, but doesn't represent the entirety of the company's gaming strategy, which would move ahead even without Activision. And then, there's a little bit here that says the CMA said concerns about the deal could not be solved by remedies such as the sale of Call of Duty or other solutions involving promises to permit rivals to offer the game on their platforms, according to a statement on Wednesday. So, like, they're not swayed by the idea of Call of Duty showing up on other cloud services or showing up on PlayStation or whatever else. Microsoft had no comment for Bloomberg about the details of that internal meeting. We were talking about Microsoft at the top of the show, obviously, around around Redfall, around the release of Redfall, and around the kind of just looking at the Xbox lineup and what are the games that differentiate the Xbox offering from its competitors. That's the sort of stuff that I think we tend to look at over in this neck of the woods, in the kind of traditional kind of games media corner of things, because that has been the fight, that has been the struggle, right? It has been Sega versus Nintendo. It has been, Sony versus Microsoft. It has been Atari versus Intellivision, like whatever, for as long as time. It's been install bases. How many consoles did they sell? Hey, they need games in order to sell those consoles. Who's got their exclusive games? And we keep coming back to this concept of exclusive games, which has often been the thing that, when asked, Phil Spencer will tell you all about how he doesn't like exclusive games and feels that they are bad for the business. And that was a stance that kind of came to light in and around this Call of Duty talk, where they were willing to sign all these 10-year deals to make sure that Call of Duty was going everywhere and whatever else. Meanwhile, Redfall doesn't go to PlayStation and some of this other stuff. Like Starfield is certainly not going to show up on other platforms. But exclusives are part of the business, and you kind of can't get away from it. And especially in a world where Sony is more than happy to play that game, whether it's its own games. I mean, they did just start putting games on PC, but obviously not day and date. But they do go out there and they do their deals and make sure that Final Fantasy stays here. And, they've, whether it's marketing arrangements that are not necessarily console exclusives or whatever, but, it makes sense for Microsoft's position to be the way it is because they are not the market leaders. And so Microsoft has been, and it's part of their approach, is they have been very hat in hand humble over these last several years, because they realized that they fucked up. Maybe not the individual people. Obviously there was regime change, whatever else from the days of Xbox One. But their approach has been to try to be the friendly option. They're like, we hear you. We care about the gamers. We want to, that has been their whole thing. And I'm not trying to poke holes in that in a way that says, oh, they don't care about it, because I think they do. Insofar as everyone does. But But also, it's kind of the only stance they can take because they are not the market leaders. And, as soon as Microsoft became the market leaders, at least in the States with the Xbox 360, as soon as they became like, hey, this console is really doing well and it's got a great mind share, whatever else, they took their eye off the ball. Don Matrick and his crew said like, oh, games, we've got that shit fucking sewn up. Television, now that is what we're into. And they fucked the whole thing up. They fucked the whole thing up because they could not stay focused. They could not leave well enough alone. This is the Sony went through this. Sony is on the rebound of this, Remember, like, the PlayStation 2 is one of the greatest consoles of all time. It is in the running. If you told me you thought that the PlayStation 2 was the best gaming platform to ever exist in the history of ever, I could buy that as an answer. I don't think I agree. Maybe I do, though. But there are so many games on the PlayStation 2 over the years. The PlayStation 2 is such a killer piece of hardware. It has so many amazing games that it is definitely in the running. Yeah, I think that's the Super Nintendo, PS2, Xbox 360. Those are probably that's probably your 1, 2, and 3 in a lot of different ways. Unless you're a Genesis guy, and then I might say, what is the Genesis better than the SNES? I mean, and then after that, what did we get? The PlayStation 3. And they said, hey man, we this game shit, we got that locked up, son. Look at this. Look at the emotion engine. Fuck you. We have the emotion engine. Get fucked. Now we're going to build the cell processor. We're going to digitally age your games in a locker. We're going to these are going to be Toy Story quality graphics. The cell processor is going to be in your fucking fridge. Your fridge is going to make your games look better because it's going to be all these cell processors in your house. It's going to be fucking badass. Rumble is for fools and suckers. We don't need that shit anymore. The PlayStation 3, it's going to do it all. The PlayStation 3 is going to suck your... This is going to be $600 because of everything is going to get done. Okay? And that is where all of the kind of like cocky Sony stuff kind of comes from, is the way they were operating around the launch of the PlayStation 3 and the things that they did or didn't do around, supporting third parties. And they just were like, fuck it, it's the PlayStation 3. What, are you going to not make games for it? It's the next PlayStation. Go fuck yourself. And you saw where that got them. It didn't hurt them as much as the Xbox One hurt Microsoft, but the PlayStation 3 was not kind to Sony. It was not kind to Sony's reputation. And so when the PlayStation 4 came around, what did they do? They did their best to appear human. They did their best to take a company that had been perceived as this weird monolith that was like, fuck you, it's $600, like the top to bottom. And they instead were nimble and wild in ways where they were just like, hey, here's how you share video games. Bump. Here's a human being doing something funny on the internet and whatever else, and doing all of that different stuff in ways that humanized that company. They spent time appealing to independent developers. They formed a very sound indie strategy in ways that tried to appeal to a wider base of players at a time when that stuff wasn't happening on console the same way. They tried to figure out the self-publishing thing. They tried to figure out all of this other stuff. They had that story. And so the story of the PlayStation 4, and on top of that, it was, like I had, talking to Mark Cerny and some other folks and talking to them about the early days of PS4 and them going out and talking to developers and listening a lot more this time around and saying like, well, what do you want out of a console? What do you need out of a console? Which everyone does, but it seemed like a much more humble process leading into the PlayStation 4. And it worked out incredibly well for them because they were taking that approach at the same time that Microsoft was making all of the same mistakes that Sony made with the PlayStation 3. Like clockwork. And Sony is still riding high off of that. I don't think that the Sony that launched the PlayStation 5 is nearly as humble as the Sony that launched the PlayStation 4. I think that under Jim Ryan, a lot of the tone and tenor of that company has changed, I think, for the worse. But Microsoft is still stuck digging its way out of that hole. And they have not finished the job. And so Sony can afford to mess up a little bit around the edges here because also they're selling consoles like fucking crazy. The metric that Microsoft doesn't like talking about, but also it's the metric that Microsoft doesn't have to talk about as much anymore because they sell their games on Steam, because they sell Game Pass, because they've diversified their business in ways that are interesting and compelling and move things forward, but also in ways that are a lot harder to quantify, a lot harder to put head to head with Sony's numbers. And so Sony can get out there and say things that are very easy to understand. Like, hey, the PlayStation 5 is outselling the PlayStation. Like when we time a line that the PlayStation 5 is selling like fucking gangbusters. And also, if you look at the lineup for big marquee titles, Sony has done better at getting their games out the door. And people like them. God of War, the Horizon sequel, most recent Gran Turismo. Even people had problems with the monetization on Gran Turismo yet again. But people were still excited about that game. Ratchet and Clank, the Spider-Man games that came out at launch. I feel like the story around PlayStation, the story around Sony has just been stronger because they have been able to ship their games and also have the third-party games that they need to have. And some of those third-party games like are kind of whatever, right? Like no one's looking like, oh man, Gotham Knights is not making or breaking anyone's console's story, right? On Xbox or PlayStation or PC for that matter. But like they're third parties are in kind of a weird disarray. Ratchet and Clank was a fantastic fucking video game. It was awesome. Miles Morales, obviously some of these games came out on the previous generation of consoles, but that almost doesn't matter at what we're talking about because you look at the sales of the PS5 and you're like, like this is the way you want to play these games. And at a time when a lot of third-party output, we're over here talking about like, oh, Jedi Survivor runs fucking weird on PlayStation and on Xbox, and this runs bad here, and this is broken here, and there's still just too many fucked up stories around a lot of third-party games that are just not running the way that you want them to. And Sony, you got to give them credit. They're putting this shit out, man, and people want it. They're also, they had some great timing with the Last of Us series, that television show hitting and people really loving it. And then that turning them on to a lot of this stuff as well. I'm not going to say that PlayStation's been firing on all cylinders or anything, because I do think that there's, like the PlayStation VR stuff is a little weird. There's just, there's bits and pieces around the edges that you look at and go like, the indie story feels different there now. It doesn't feel like as big a part of their, and they have people devoted to that stuff, but it just doesn't feel as tangible as it used to. And I think that their answer to Game Pass, or them trying to have these tiers of subscription services, I think is an abject failure. They have not rolled out enough classic games. They have not added enough great games to that. Like it's not there the way it should be. But I don't think you can argue with the quality of the first party stuff that they've been putting out, even if some of it is not to my liking, not to my tastes or whatever. Like personally, like that aside, like whatever. They've got games that people want to play and people can only play them there. And then eventually, if you wait long enough, they come to PC. And for the most part, they run okay there, with some recent exceptions, I suppose. And that's when you look at the Microsoft side of things, not that this is just always some big two-sided argument of Sony versus Microsoft, right? Because there's it's games now. It's not necessarily even platforms because everything comes out everywhere with the exception of these exclusive games. The Microsoft story is just not nearly as sound. It's not where it needs to be for the environment that they find themselves in. Redfall's a crushing one, I think, in a lot of ways. Not that, again, not that you can really or should really put that heavy of expectations on something like Redfall. But by virtue of them just not having a lot of first party stuff lately, and a lot of the first party stuff that Microsoft has been putting out has not hit the way it used to, that then Redfall becomes much more important than it ever should have been. Because what else is coming out? Because what else is happening? Because what else, because Halo didn't get it done the way it should have, or because Fable hasn't materialized in a reasonable way yet, or whatever it is. Things just ain't popping off on the Xbox side of things. It's in bad shape. And so now you look at the UK stepping in and blocking the purchase of Activision. And, part of this, the headline on this Bloomberg story is Microsoft Xbox chief seeks to reassure game staff on Activision. And that means that's Phil Spencer getting up in front of people and saying, like, this ain't going to sink us. We still got that's part of our strategy. That's not the whole strategy. But it does start to get back into this, like, it does lead to this larger conversation about, like, well, what is the strategy then? And yeah, Paul in chat is will Xbox be spun off? I don't think so. I think Microsoft sees the value in having a gaming division. They need to have that. Windows needs games. They need to have this brand, and I don't think spinning it off does it any favors, because Microsoft separated from the money that it uses to be Microsoft, or the Xbox separated from Microsoft's money is not going to compete better in the marketplace. They'll be at an even bigger disadvantage if they can't tap into the Microsoft budgets and try to place these big bets. And so I don't know what you do at that point. So but like, I don't see what the road forward is for, other than, like, they need to put out games and the games need to be good. That solves a lot of problems for them, because I think Game Pass, and I think their overall strategy makes sense, where they're just like, fuck it, we'll put these games out on PC, we'll put them out everywhere, they'll be on Steam. Buy them on Steam, we don't care. We'll put them on Game Pass, you can get them on Game Pass. And if they just had great games, this would be such a different conversation. You could make the argument that, like, oh, well, Sony is still selling a ton of games, and they're selling a ton of consoles, and Microsoft might have great games, but they're not doing it. Like, that becomes a murkier comparison, right? Because, again, we don't care. The install base of the Xbox Series X and Series S is not the full story of the Xbox business anymore, and it hasn't been for a long time. And so it's harder to do these comparisons about, like, well, there are twice as many PlayStation 5s in the marketplace as there are Xboxes. Like, sure, okay, yeah. I own an Xbox. I don't need to, generally speaking, because I tend to play most of those games on PC. I am the exact person that if I was not in this the way I'm in this, I would not see a need to own an Xbox. I would be doing Game Pass on PC. That's gotten to a point where it's fine. Like, that was kind of an issue for a while there. I would be playing Microsoft's first party games via a Game Pass subscription happily, and that would be that. But yeah, they need hits. And now Redfall kind of coming out and not getting it done, or not that Redfall was going to get it done, but I guess like, again, Redfall being mediocre. Like if Redfall came out and it was solid but not great, you'd be like, cool, man, awesome. Great. That's a solid Game Pass. Yeah, sure. You would at least feel good about it. But instead it kicks that can down the road even further, and now everyone working on Starfield, I feel like their job just got a little bit harder, right? Because all eyes were already on that game, make no mistake. But like, that's it. Again, unless we get to June and Microsoft announces a bunch of stuff, and some of that stuff is out this year, and whatever else, like we'll get Forza, and I'm sure Forza will be fucking cool for what it is. I hesitate to use I see Easy Pickle saying make or break. I'm hesitant to use that specific phrase because I don't think that I don't think the Xbox brand is in a situation where they are going to get broke. But imagine a world where Starfield comes out and is plagued with issues, or is just not what people are looking for, and is like, imagine a world where Starfield comes out and doesn't hit. Imagine a world where Starfield comes out and is like met with a lukewarm reaction for one reason or another, whether it's technical issues, which that team is very widely known for, launching with a lot of technical problems. What does that do for them going forward? It will do well. A ton of people will sign up for Game Pass to play Starfield, probably. Maybe. Right? But what happens then? Are they going to get ready? Do you think that they'll announce a new Gears of War? But also, okay, that's my two-part question. One, June's right around the corner. Microsoft's getting ready to make some announcements. Do you think that they will confirm that a new Gears of War is in development? And here is my follow-up question. Does that matter the way it used to? I think the franchises that we tend to think of as Microsoft's marquee franchises have gotten old, and they have not refreshed them. Halo Infinite was a great opportunity for them to do that, and it didn't come together as cleanly as it should. The last Gears came out, and I thought it was a good game. I thought it was an interesting campaign. I think their attempts at making a more open world type of thing are largely superfluous and don't really benefit the game all that much. And I am not interested in the competitive multiplayer of Gears, so I'm not a good judge of that. But what are the types of games that people want and people are gravitating to in a massive way these days? Because it's not a third-person competitive shooter like Gears. Yeah, get Ice-T back. Whatever. Gears, it'll have some fun co-op. Like, Gears is cool. I like Gears. I'm not saying that like, oh, Gears is dead or I fucking hate Gears. I enjoy it. I enjoyed the last one. I have the only bad Gears game is Judgment. But my point is if Gears of War came out and it was the best Gears of War game ever, do you think that moves the needle? Does that really, like, what do they need? They need something massive, right? I mean, they probably what are could they ever make a GTA Online sized experience that does something in that realm? Obviously they have Minecraft, and Minecraft is probably still a money factory, right? And so when you look at all the stuff they have and don't have, man, Call of Duty would plug into that pretty well, wouldn't it? If they could say, hey, we've got Diablo 4, that would really look nice as a part of their portfolio. Even being able to say, yeah, man, World of Warcraft, that's us now. That's cool. I don't know, man. I could sit here and spin on this for another hour because it's just like I don't know what the answer is. I just don't think that any of the existing Microsoft franchises have the heat on them that they need to be the hit that turns the fortunes around or whatever. You know? Like, it's not, I don't, like, will Perfect Dark be what is Perfect Dark in this day and age, right? What are they doing with Perfect Dark? They'll do their spin on it. And how good would what would Perfect Dark have to be in order to be like a massive, massive, massive hit? And can it realistically achieve that? I don't think so. So I guess the answer is it's no one game. They need to have all of their games start hitting a little harder and doing a little bit better, perhaps, right? Because again, it's not like, God of War Ragnarok is revolutionary, right? It's another one of those, and it was very well received. Even Ratchet and Clank, the stuff that Sony is doing is very derivative of the stuff that they have been doing. It just feels like the landscape is such that people are still interested in those styles of games, those franchises, whatever it is, in a way that I just don't feel that people are there for Halo and Gears. And so what else? Can they? Yes, genre-defining games. That's, it's Zorgia Flambalaken. Probably pronouncing that wrong. It says, yes, Halo defined the first-person shooter. Gears defined the cover shooter. Xbox needs genre-defining games again, not Redfall. Now, I don't know that I would say that Halo... Okay, fine. Sure. Halo defined console first-person shooting as much as GoldenEye did, as much as Call of Duty did, I suppose. And Gears of War is still the gold standard for cover shooting, as far as I can tell. You might not like that the enemies are bullet sponges, but like I still feel like that is still the game that you are comparing games to when other cover shooters come out. It ain't Kill Switch, put it that way. So now what? I don't know. Like that's the thing that Microsoft has to wake up to and say, okay, now what? Like, surely they had contingencies that well, if the UK does come down on us and shut this down, we will appeal. But now what? If we don't get Call of Duty, if we don't get these Activision games on Game Pass, then where do we spend that money instead? Do we go try to acquire somebody else, or would that just lead us right back into the same fucking mess again? Or do they invest in themselves, continue to build up their own studios? I don't know. Because it just doesn't feel like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like they have the goods right now. It's as simple as that. And until they can put together a string of games that you're at least going, hey, these games are good. The games that are mid 70s, right? Not low 60s like Redfall. If you can start putting some of those together, and then peppering in fun shit around the edges like Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment and like if you can have some breadth to that story, I think things do turn around. I don't know what they do in that kind of huge game, AAA, quad A, whatever fucking dumb term we want to put on it, big, wild, mainstream video game that attracts people that don't play a lot of video games, that help people understand the power of video games. You know, the way a GTA Online does, though maybe not that big. Maybe that's not an unrealistic goal, right? But like, what do you do to get there? And how do you pave the way to get there? It feels like that's been the thing they've been trying to do. And then, again, on these smaller games, like people love Pentiment, like Hi-Fi Rush is really cool. Like there's little bits and pieces around the edges that are happening. And you go like, yeah, man, fuck yeah. But there's no big stamp. There's no big mic drop. Fuck you. We're Xbox. Blah. You know, that game doesn't seem to exist in their lineup right now. Or if it does, they haven't announced it yet. I don't know. Like I said, we could talk in circles around this shit forever, but it just it's hard for me to see the immediate. What is the immediate next move from Microsoft other than just keep doing it? That's all you can do. You're like, this shit is all a big distraction. Maybe we'll get Activision, maybe we won't. But if you're out there and you're working on Fable, or if you're out there and you're working on new modes for Halo, or you're working on Perfect Dark, whatever it is, stay in line. Keep going. That's the only thing you can do. Is try to make those games as good, because all of it helps, right? It's a weird one for sure. You have to wonder at some point, and at what point, I guess, is actually maybe the right way to phrase this. Does some of this stuff start to reflect poorly on the current leadership team at Xbox? So there's a lot of stuff you can look at and go like, hey man, they were dealt a fucking rough hand. And then the pandemic happened and they got fucked by that. And they got, there's a lot of stuff you can look at and go like, none of this is the fault of the people making decisions over there. They got a lot of fucking bad shit happen. But at some point, you just go like, hey, this ain't working. We got to try something else. We got to put somebody else in the seat. We got to bring a new team in here and see if we can shake things up. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I have no idea. I just look at it and go like, it doesn't feel like it's, I don't know. Like I said, my approach used to, the way I used to think about the Xbox brand was always like, they've been dealt a pretty bad hand by the previous regime. They're doing a really good job of unfucking it. But every time they build to a point where it's like, here's our pivot point, and we've unfucked all this stuff along the way, and we've got all this goodwill, and now boom, here's a game coming out, and then it's Halo, and people are pissed, and you're like, shit, we were right there, we were so close to solving this problem. I don't know, the problems just seem bigger than that now. So I don't know, and then none of this is driven by, this is not data-driven analysis by me. This is not me looking at numbers. I don't have access to that stuff. A lot of this has to be vibe and feel and whatever else, right? And that's how I've done this for a good long time. And I'm at least okay at it, I guess I'll say. So yeah, it's a weird situation. That's it for the news. Maybe we have time for a couple of emails here before we take off. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Hit me up and I'll check out your emails. Some of them will make it to the show. Grant wrote in and said, it's weird to me that Media Molecule still feels like the new darlings of the industry that are just one game away from their big hit. It still feels like they've just made Little Big Planet and Dreams and they're just getting started. Only all 4 people that founded the studio have now left. Makes me worried for the future of that developer, but also Sony, as they've moved away from experimental games to everything has to be a third-person action-adventure game, which I feel like everyone is tired of. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point to what we were talking about. I mean, there is always the possibility that Sony's luck runs out on that stuff and people get tired of Sony's formula. right? It's been working really well for them, but so was Ubisoft's at a point. I don't know that I think that Media Molecule, and also, those games are selling really well, and yeah, sure, people could become less interested in those games, but I don't think I don't think we're seeing many signs of that, I'll say. Even as I myself, I don't really care about Last of Us, did not much care for God of War Ragnarok. It's good. I'm saying these are bad games. It's just like games that did not resonate with me. It's Last of Us. It's God of War. I got halfway through the most recent Horizon and kind of just fell off of it because I thought the storytelling was really bland. And you kind of once you see the story unfold and go like, oh, okay. Uncharted, I've never been a big fan. Anyway, I don't necessarily agree with you. I don't feel like Media Molecule feels like the new darlings of the industry. I think they've been around for a long time. They've made multiple Little Big Planets, and now Dreams is kind of running its course. And I think that I agree with you that the future of that developer feels a little in question because that is not necessarily the style of game that Sony is making these days. But Little Big Planet is old as hell. They have been doing this for a long time. They do not feel like new darlings to me, especially, yes, the people that founded the studio have moved on. And I don't know what you have that team do. It sounds like they have a new thing that they are working on in some capacity as they move on from Dreams. But yeah, people keep saying Mod Nation Racers, which a sequel to Tearaway would be neat, but I don't know. I think if you made a new Little Big Planet and had it, I think what if you took the lessons learned from the creation suite in Little Big Planet, but aged it up a little bit and made it more mechanically tight, like a more modern platformer. I think that could be cool, but probably not. I don't think that's something that's like a big gangbusters kind of takeoff hit. Maybe they move away from the creation tools completely and they just make a game. This is entirely possible. Or maybe they make a game that makes Jumping Flash sequels. You push a button and a Jumping Flash sequel flies out of it. What if you gave them all of the classic weird old Sony IP? From Siphon Filter to SOCOM to Jumping Flash to Ape Escape. And just said, I don't know, make something that makes games and use all these parts. Use all these parts. Here's Rico from Killzone. Have fun. Here's all the animals from Tokyo Jungle. Yeah, here's Jack and Daxter. Here's everything, I don't know. I agree that the future of Media Molecule seems like very interesting in that it doesn't feel like they are aligned with what Sony has claimed is the stuff they truly, really care about, which is their big single player hits, but also, they're like, we want to have 12 live service games in development. So maybe they work on that. Maybe they're like, what can we do that's a live service game? What if we sold more creation packs and like you could buy more parts to make better level? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what that studio does from here. But I do know that when they do announce something, I will be very interested to see it. Because if nothing else, Media Molecule has proved that they are making fascinating things, even if those games haven't necessarily landed. Whatever. Little Big Planet was a big deal. What the creation suite looks like. Is there a way for them to make it even easier to make games? I don't know. Do you put them on a VR only project because you probably need more of those? That's always possible. I don't know. That is but yeah, it feels like the things that they have made don't always align with where the PlayStation brand is in terms of games, but also they would benefit from having more variety anyway. So if I were running the PlayStation portfolio, I would be happy to have Media Molecule making the weird stuff they were making, as long as it wasn't something that was coming in massively over budget or something like that. Just because I think you need that as part of your story. It's like, hey, as long as it's making its money back, if it doesn't have to be a smash hit profit or whatever, but if they're putting out games and making their money back, then you just go like, okay, this helps diversify the portfolio in ways that make us seem wider and richer than we really are. And so the entire brand benefits from us having this little weird thing off to the side. If that makes any sense, it probably doesn't. It's probably someone involved in some business side of the business watching me say this going like, no. I'm like, all right, fair enough. But what are you gonna do? Fire them all and then hire a bunch of kill zone? It's like, no, don't do that either. That'd be fucking terrible. Another Sony question coming in from Nate. Is it true that Sony had anti-2D game policy at the beginning of the PlayStation's lifespan? It sounds absolutely insane, so I'd like to know if you, as someone working in the industry during that time, had direct knowledge about it. I don't know that I would call it direct knowledge, like I never saw paperwork or anything like that, but yes, it was a pretty well understood situation that in the early days of the PlayStation, Sony was looking for games that took advantage of the 3D hardware because they knew that differentiated them from the Saturn, because they knew they would win that fight every time. And so they were looking for games that truly looked different, and they were looking to get behind games like that. They did not fully shut down 2D game development. Remember, Symphony of the Night exists. Street Fighter Alpha came out on the PlayStation. Street Fighter the fucking movie came out. There are certainly 2D games on PlayStation. And so it wasn't like a thing where they were very clearly shutting down development and forcing third parties to move away from it or whatever. But in terms of games that they were getting behind from a marketing perspective, if you wanted your game to be in the magazine ad or in the television commercial or whatever as a third party, your 2D game was not going to be the thing, because they were looking for the bigger, flashier games. And so I think it was my understanding is that it was more of a soft, like, hey, maybe make some 3D games, as opposed to you will not make 3D games. And some of that may have been in the US when it comes to games that they were thinking about localizing and bringing over. Like in Japan, I think they were a little more like laissez-faire, just like, I fucking do whatever. But in the US, when it came to having that library and curating that library and also marketing that library, they wanted things that looked new and flashy, and not, Alundra or fucking the first Legacy of Kain, for example, which is an amazing video game. So yeah, that was always the way I heard it. And I think if you look at the output, you can look at it and go like, yeah, of course there were 2D games on this platform. So it was not some hard policy. Let's see. Let's take one more here before we go. Rowan from New Zealand writes in and says, obviously, the move to less powerful and feature-unique consoles has worked out well for Nintendo. However, with gaming's landscape being more and more focused on exclusive IP, I feel like Nintendo could bring the fight to the competition if they wanted to. Okay. Surely a box that runs the new Call of Duty, FIFA, and Ubisoft games, as well as the new entries from Nintendo's franchises, would be a no-brainer for most families. Do you think that's a scenario we will ever see play out? After all, the Series X is just a GameCube 2. They are taking it to the competition. Have you looked at how many Switches they've sold? Have you looked at how they're selling? They're doing just fine. They are running Japan. They are running video games in Japan. It's not a, they are already doing that. And it's not what you're asking though is like, should Nintendo be a better platform for third parties that are creating multi-platform games? I think that would be cool. Nintendo does not care. They do care. That's not to say, whatever. Nintendo has a third-party division devoted to caring. But Nintendo is really interested in their own games and making sure that they are making a platform that is good at running their games. Because their games are the things that sell. And I guess like the argument you could make is like, if Nintendo had a platform out that was as powerful as the other consoles in the market, would third-party sales be better? Probably. It certainly wouldn't hurt, but like third-party sales have never, are rarely a big deal on Switch. It's something they care about and they want to have, but it's not their focus. Because in return, the third parties don't focus on the Switch the way that they do the other platforms. FIFA does come out on the Switch, but it's FIFA Legacy Edition. It's like last gen FIFA. It's not getting all the latest bells and whistles and features and whatever else. But also, we had a great run of indie games that are not necessarily super dependent on the current console's power. And those games run great on Switch. And so the Switch ended up having a very rich indie library. And so those, like the exciting third-party releases on Switch are, I don't know, what, like Dead Cells, Hades, like the third-party games that we think of as being great everywhere are amazing on Switch because you can take it with you. And they run just as well, or just about as well, in a way that, works perfectly. So I think their third-party strategy around games like that, or rallying around games like that where they can, doing these kind of indie-focused directs and doing what they can around that, around games that don't necessarily need the latest and greatest ray tracing fucking GPUs or whatever to matter. I think they're doing a really good job with that stuff. And I think that Nintendo wasting a bunch of, like, if Nintendo had to sell their platform for $500, that is the antithesis of what Nintendo is about. If you want to think about Nintendo, if you want to like start to try to think about what Nintendo will do next, or what Nintendo is likely to do in any situation, the thing to remember is that at the core of Nintendo's thought process is this idea of the family and making things for families, making things that are fun for families to enjoy. And yes, it's the Fast and Furious of video game platforms. And so a lot of their decisions, whether they get it right or not, is a separate debate, right? But I think a lot of their decisions go through that lens. And that is the stuff that they are thinking about when they make moves. When they decide to make a Mario movie, like who's going to make that movie and why, what's the focus of it, and whatever else, they're thinking about families. When they're like, hey, let's make a theme park, who's this going to be for? They're thinking about families. The Zelda, the current, like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is almost like an anomaly in that sense, because I think that those games are complex in a way that maybe make them a little bit less appealing to the younger members of that demographic, which is interesting because, that's kind of not what Nintendo has been all about. But yes, Nintendo is looking to Disney for inspiration, I guess I would say. Maybe not inspiration, but like, like they are in a similar lane to Disney when it comes to that style of thinking. And so when you think about Nintendo's moves, think about them that way. Does having a console that comes out and is $500 or $600, is that family friendly? No, absolutely not. That is enthusiast pricing. And so I don't think that Nintendo will want to. And when it comes time for them to make another console, they're not going to take it to Microsoft and Sony on the hardware front. I just don't think that that's where their money is made. I don't think that's beneficial to them long term. I think it betrays a lot of their long term fans to have a console that's that expensive. And so when I think about what Nintendo does next, I think the Switch has been a very good form factor for them. I think that they like having a handheld because that's great for kids while the TV is in use or whatever. You know, they had all sorts of, you know, it's like, oh, well, you can play the Wii U tablet while someone's watching the TV. And like there's just like use case scenarios that they tend to think about, right? Like the whole family is together and maybe someone's watching television while someone is playing a game, while someone is reading a book, while someone's doing while you're at your rooftop party, while you're doing, you know, they are the ones thinking about these scenarios around people being together. It's why whenever anyone talks about a virtual reality strategy for Nintendo, it's silly because that is the antithesis of what Nintendo is about. It's not to say they would never do that, but it would be out of character for them, and they would think about ways to make it work within that ethos. They would try to find ways to make that stuff make sense. And so I really think if you think about what does Nintendo do next in the marketplace, it's driven by a number of things, right? It's going to be like, oh, well, what hardware can we move to without breaking the bank on an R&D perspective or on a, you know, like we want to keep the price down as much as possible because we want to try to make this at least sort of affordable. But also we want to make it accessible to a wide variety of players at a wide variety of skill levels, and so on and so forth. That to me is the actual Nintendo difference. And that is the stuff that I think you need to be looking at. The fantasy, the kind of ongoing fantasy of like, oh, if they made the most powerful machine, it would play Mario and it would play Call of Duty and it would be game over. Like, again, look at how they're selling in Japan. They're doing fucking fine. So try to, you know, remember that when you try to think about what Nintendo's next move would be, because that's always going to inform whatever they're doing next. And that's going to do it for us here. Thanks everybody for watching. This week we'll play some Redfall. I'll show off some Redfall. And some other games. I don't know. Some other stuff came out. I am going to be checking in with Star Wars Jedi Survivor to see if that new patch did anything for my specific use case where it keeps crashing. It would be nice if it didn't crash. And I feel like I want to play more I have not played a ton of Redfall. And so there's a part of me that wants to see a little bit more of it just to kind of see it for myself. But, you know, kind of seeing what people are saying about it combined with the time that I have spent with the game myself, game's a big bummer. But it's out this week. We'll spend a little bit of time with it at least and check it all out and see how it runs and whatever else. We'll do that this week. And again, the Patreon over at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. This week, we should be getting the new episode of Game Boys to Men out the door for you. I just have to cut it together and get it out the door. Hopefully that'll happen tonight if my son goes to sleep and is not restless, then I will get that video out the door as soon as I possibly can. And then, of course, the latest edition of the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame, also recorded. I've got to put some edits on that and get that to you as well. So hopefully get both of those out for you this week over on the Patreon, enjoyyourgaming.com, and so on and so forth. I am going to get going, and I will see you. If you're watching live, I'll be back here Wednesday. We'll play some Redfall tomorrow, I guess. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.